Oh, okay. Hello and good afternoon from the International Space University in Strasbourg, France, and welcome to the final team project presentations for our MSc in Space Studies, the MSS, class of 2021. I'm Professor Chris Welch, the MSS Program Director. For the second year in a row, the coronavirus has impacted the MSS. Although we all started the academic year together at the central campus, the second wave of the pandemic has meant that since November, we have been running the program remotely. All of us have had to improve our collaborative working methods to achieve today's milestone. I'd like to thank all involved, students, staff and faculty for their positive attitude, their focus and their hard work. Some of you watching on the internet will know ISU very well, others maybe not so much. So I'd like to emphasize what we call the 3 I's that are at the heart of ISU, its community and its programs. The 3 I's stand for international, interdisciplinary and intercultural. ISU develops the future leaders of the world space community by providing interdisciplinary educational programs to students and space professionals in an international and intercultural environment. What does that mean here today? It means that both the team projects and the students who've worked on them and who are presenting them today are truly interdisciplinary in scope. For example, we have life scientists, aerospace engineers, archaeologists, IT specialists, business experts, to name only a few of the domains represented. I hope then that it's clear that ISU is not an engineering school or a business school or a law school. It is in fact I would say the space school. This afternoon, we have 2 team projects being presented, both of them completely online with all the participants remote from each other. We encourage our teams to be creative in their presentation formats, so I look forward to seeing what they have achieved and learning from them. The format for each project will be a 1-hour presentation followed by a 30-minute Q&A, which will be, I'm sorry to say, only for the project sponsors and the ISU faculty because we have to grade the teams today. No pressure. After the first presentation and Q&A, there will be a short break and then we will start the second one. The MSS21 team projects are Space Medical Center and Space and Oceans. It's now my great pleasure to hand over to team project Space Medical Center.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction, Dr. Welch. We appreciate the confidence boost and we'll try not to let it go to our head. To our distinguished guests, faculty, and teammates, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. We're beyond thrilled to present to you the culmination of our team's research on the Space Medical Center. And here on the right, I want to draw your attention to our originally designed mission patch. Prominently featured here on this are several aspects of maintaining human health in space that we're looking forward to sharing with you today. From the team, we wish to express our gratitude for a lot of things first, primarily to the ISU, and of course, to our project advisors, Dr. Virginia Watering and Dr. Taiwo Tejamola, for their invaluable guidance over this past year. To both NASA and CNES, we truly relished the opportunity to research the Space Medical Center, and it is our hope that we achieved your respective goals and can convince you on the necessity of a Space Medical Center for the future of human spaceflight. Before we begin, it's important to put a face to a name, or in this case, face to a project proposal. So we'd like you to meet the team. As you can tell, we've benefited from a multicultural and interdisciplinary team. We are 16 students from 12 different countries committed to one goal, analyzing the feasibility, necessity, and usefulness of a space medical center. We believe the diversity of skills throughout our team uniquely qualifies us to achieve this goal. Over the next hour, we will approach this goal by breaking it into smaller pieces. We will examine 3 plausible environments for a space medical center to exist in. First, in low Earth orbit, or LEO, on the lunar surface, and in a self-contained artificial gravity environment. We've decided on these 3 scenarios to complement the existing space infrastructure and to also parallel the future of human exploration in space. Woven throughout these scenarios are themes of sustainability, feasibility, and the pertinent questions of space travel, as they relate to ethics, innovation, policy, and business. So we're 5 slides in, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, great, nice to meet you and all, but what is a Space Medical Center and why is it important? In short, the Space Medical Center is a proposed Swiss Army knife for operations in space. It has a lot of functions. First, it'll function as a health and performance clinic, as well as an emergency medical treatment center. The previous 6 decades of human spaceflight have been fortunate to not experience an abundance of medical emergencies. However, as the amount of astronauts, both public and private, trained and less trained, continues to increase, it will be important to have a dedicated module for emergency and clinical care, which currently doesn't exist. It's well documented that many physiological changes happen to the body in space, whether they're injury related or not, and thus the Space Medical Center will also function as an exercise and rehabilitation center. Training in varying degrees of gravity within the Space Medical Center will also be possible and will be beneficial for evaluating longer duration stays in space. Lastly, it is unlikely that a Space Medical Center will constantly be treating patients, and thus life science research can be conducted within the Space Medical Center to shed more light on the biology of spaceflight. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor to my esteemed colleague, Katua.
Thank you, Graham. From now on, we will refer to the Space Medical Center as SMC. First, when we started designing our SMC, 3 different concepts were developed: scenario 1, 2, and 3. Each scenario has unique capabilities and characteristics. Scenario 1 is an SMC located in low Earth orbit. This module could be attached to the already existing ISS. This is our most realistic design with existing technology. This module can be completed within the next 10 years. In the second scenario, we developed an SMC that is located on the Lunar Surface. With future missions, for example, NASA's Artemis program, and future Mars missions, we focus on what a SMC based on another celestial body would look like. Depending on how the Artemis program and other privately planned missions go, the SMC Loon can begin construction within the next 20 years. For the third scenario, we designed a concept that would address the problem of microgravity. Microgravity is one of the main stresses for the human body in space, as we learned, also a challenging factor when designing medical center in space. Simply put, humans in space can either tailor each action they do every day to microgravity, or they can combat the problem directly. This SMC is designed to be part of a space station with artificial gravity located in LEO, now referred to as the gravity wheel. A realistic timeline for this concept is up to 40 plus years. First, we're going to have a look at SMC in LEO. This SMC is an attachable module to the ISS, about the same size as the current Columbus module. It will be equipped with the personnel and medical equipment necessary to provide comprehensive healthcare from primary to emergency care. It will also host an extensive lab with appropriate technology for a wide variety of in situ applications. Additionally, rack space will be made available in the walls and ceilings for customizable and commercial-driven research projects. Whilst designing this module, the main question we asked ourselves was, how can we improve what's already on the ISS, and what else do we need on board? Whilst future astronauts will not only be highly skilled and experienced, but also paying tourists with much more complicated medical needs, we had to ensure that this module can facilitate both. Now we will elaborate on the different functions of SMC in LEO. Crew members need routine care and ways to maintain performance. Thus, the SMC can facilitate a health and performance clinic. The LEO module will provide primary care for basic healthcare needs and regular checkups, pharmacological care for common medications, psychological care for dealing with isolation and confinement, and lastly, dental care for minor tooth repairs and to prevent infections. Accidents and illnesses occur despite prevention. Therefore, the SMC LEO will provide emergency, surgical, and intensive care. Emergency care involves the treatment of severe injuries and illnesses, trauma care, airway management, ventilation, and defibrillation. Surgical care for when patients need operative care before evacuation. and intensive care for in-depth monitoring, mechanical ventilation, and intravenous medications before transfer. Exercise is an important countermeasure for musculoskeletal loss in microgravity. Rehabilitation is an important recovery in illness or injury. For these reasons, we have supplementary equipment for the already existing ISS infrastructure that will be used for workouts and activities to maintain bone health and develop strength. The crew members of the SMC LEO can learn from additional training exercises from Earth and also teach their experiences to the ground. The SMC LEO has an advanced telecommunications capability with real-time interaction. This module can facilitate real-time training, diagnosis, and procedure. It has the necessary equipment for telemedicine, which gives astronauts on-board consultation access to experts who can assist them real-time. What makes this module so unique is that it can change into different configurations depending on the task at hand. The first section of this module solely dedicated to medical care, while the ISS only have medical racks distributed all over the station. So this SMC is an all-in-one medical center which caters for all the astronauts' health needs. It has all the medical and research equipment in one place with added equipment to perform many different functions. For surgical care, we have added equipment, for example, a 3D printable ventilator that also functions as an anesthesia machine, a foldable bed that also acts as a dental tray, as well as IV pumps for continuous IV medications. We also have tools to conduct laparoscopy to minimize invasive procedures in space. With regards to psychological care, we also designed a quiet, closed room for psychological counseling on board and online via telemedicine. This module can also act as a decompression chamber, which means it can pressurize to treat decompression illness. We have equipment to place invasive drains like chest tubes or abscess drains. We have a table for gynecology exams, and we also have overhead examination lights. For our research section, we've allocated racks that are available for commercial hiring, and the second part of our SMC also functions as a state-of-the-art research facility with additional research equipment, for example, bioprinting. We also designed a communication system for the SMC LEO. In this diagram, you can see that the docking link to the ISS or other spacecraft would be made in a specially allocated frequency. Therefore, another frequency, shown in blue, for the telemetry, tracking, and commands of the module in both ways. The data would travel from the SMC module to the tracking and data relay satellites, and these would retransmit the data to mission control, either through the GOM remote ground control terminal or the White Sands ground terminal. We would have a separate frequency for telemedicine video, teleconferences, and training sessions, which is shown in green. Now Geraldine will explain the Life Science Research Facility and its unique capabilities.
Thank you, Kato. In the history of the humanity, we have now reached a new era in which the human wants to live in space and become a planetary species. The second mission of the Space Medical Center will be to perform research to support future deep space mission and outer space settlements. For this purpose, the Space Medical Center will carry a high-level technology research facility with three different objectives. The first objective will be to expand the knowledge of life on Earth to better understand how to live elsewhere and the concept of habitability. The second objective will be to expand the life quality on Earth in general, in line with the 70 Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations. And finally, and at the same time, the third objective will be to enhance the performance of humans in space to expand the humanity beyond Earth. Specifically, the life science research will emphasize on microbiology, organ-on-chip, stem cell, protein crystallization, and biomarker. The identification of biomarker with the help of high-throughput analysis that enable the whole biomolecule analysis, the omic analysis, will account for the construction of a personal library of datasets for astronauts and enable real-time monitoring of astronauts in space and personalized medicine. Also, better characterization with protein crystallization will enable to better understand the structure, the property, the affinity, and drug specificity. We also investigate the stem cell for the regenerative property, and also organ and chip as an alternative of animals model, as they allow an overview of physiological system at a microscopic size. Organ-on-chip could be also investigated as biosensing for radiation. And finally, microbiology associated with bioengineering and genetic engineering to edit the genome of bacteria, but also plants, to produce useful molecule for human purpose as therapeutic will be investigated in the research facility of the Space Medical Center. Another part very essential for outer space settlement is the sustainability. Current life support systems are not sustainable. This is because we used to live in ecosystem unique on Earth for billions of years. Ecosystems are dynamic structure in which species live together with beneficial reciprocs and in interaction with the environment. It allows efficient management of resources, and as such, artificial ecosystem as a life support system for outer space settlement should be investigated in the research facility. Especially, the research will emphasize to how to reproduce the small part of the natural ecosystem from the primary producer to the secondary consumer, that is us, the crew, and how to implement the future new organism that we will edit the genome to produce, for example, useful molecule like therapeutic. Also, to enhance the food production, farming capacity, and how to produce more with less, and extract more nutrients and energy from biomass should be investigated. In the next slide, we will show you the interior of the module that we have designed in collaboration with an external designer. The configuration has been thought to be to optimize the space available, but also to be logical with the experiments that will be performed. For example, on the left side, you can see that there is an area for the cell culture with the cell incubator here and the glove box next to that. In this slide, you can see that we have placed a table in which cardiopulmonary resuscitation can be performed, and it is a retractable table that is also convertible into a dental chair. You can see here the place of the light, and in the next slide, we can also see that we have think about the place of the device to monitor in real time the astronauts. And you can see also in the middle the arm that will retract the table and the place in which the table will be stored. Here is a site from the glove box, from which you can see on the right the bioengineering area with the bioprinter, and next to that there is the microscope and the biological molecular area. Also, in the design we have included a lot of space for storage that will enable high storage capacity. And we also included empty space to further scientific device like vogue tosser, centrifuge, and other. And now we invite you for a 3D immersion in the Space Medical Center. And now I pass the floor to Evan.
Thank you, Geraldine. For the next step in the medical center's evolution, we will be venturing to the lunar surface. This design is in anticipation of the increase in lunar habitation that is expected to occur over the next few decades. This specific arrangement predicts around 40 people inhabiting the moon while providing medical autonomy to its inhabitants. The site will produce energy locally, utilizing in situ resources. This will not go without some exceptional challenges along the way. Gravity is partial at 1/6 g. The vacuum of space and its temperature gradient is just as lethal as it is in Earth orbit. Furthermore, the day and night cycle is yet to be established and could see weeks of daylight followed by weeks of nighttime. Therefore, this treacherous atmosphere may result in a higher demand for medical services as the population on the moon increases. The functions for treating patients and performing research offered in LEO will be much the same as the Lunar Space Medical Center, with some modest additions. The Lunar Space Medical Center will serve as a testbed in partial gravity for deep space missions, like missions to Mars. This will focus on 4 technology categories: individual empowerment technologies that give insight into the health status of lunar inhabitants, artificial intelligence assistance for diagnostic aid and guidance with decision-making, personalized medicine at the molecular level, permitting diagnosis by molecular phenotype characterization and adoption of healthcare to individual patients, as well as on-demand care to produce pharmaceuticals on-site as they are needed. After the Lunar Gateway concept has finished construction by the members of NASA's Artemis program, there may be the need for a medical center on the moon to service the researchers, construction workers, and possibly miners that will occupy the first lunar habitat. There, they will be isolated from the Earth without possibility of speedy evacuation to Earth in the case of severe illness or injury. Of course, there will be psychological care. Deep space and long-duration crews will experience new levels of isolation, confinement, and possibly even depression. Therefore, psychologists will need to be on the lunar crew, and Earth patient conferences will be frequent. There will also be pharmacological care, accompanied by huge improvements in storage, packaging, and manufacturing, giving additional protection to pharmaceuticals. Furthermore, it may even be possible to manufacture limited pharmaceuticals on site. This medical center will not just be limited to routine care, as dangers will no doubt be constantly present, and evacuation back to Earth becomes increasingly less feasible the further we travel from Earth. With the advantage of gravity, emergent care could be simpler and more effective in many ways. Restraining patients and staff to work on an injured person may not be as critical, since the patient will not move when minor force is applied. This will probably make airway management more effective, with the ability to better control the patient and manipulate the head and body with the additional force of gravity acting as a counterforce. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, in particular, might also be more practical. More force can be applied more easily, and crew members can change roles, performing compressions more quickly. There will also likely be more space to work in the Lunar Space Medical Center. And meanwhile, transporting a patient may be more difficult due to the gravity, and lunar dust could cause contamination of clean or sterile equipment, even indoors, or on the moon's surface in an emergency. The Lunar Space Medical Center will have a refrigeration unit and a dedicated section for storage of blood products. The purpose will be to maintain a supply for research and medical purposes, along with equipment for separation of blood components and the ability to test blood. This capability will be known as the blood bank. It will consist of a refrigeration unit at 4 degrees Celsius and a freezer at -25 degrees Celsius, and a blood warmer. For medical purposes, the blood bank will serve as a center for transfusion medicine. There is no medication at this time that can replace blood product transfusion for certain. The gold standard for treatment is replacement of blood products to control bleeding and restore oxygen carrying capacity. If a need arises, a transfusion will be performed aboard the Lunar Space Medical Center. Surgical care will surely become more necessary. Closed head injuries with intracranial hemorrhage, blunt or penetrating trauma, gastrointestinal hemorrhage, or appendicitis could arise at any time during a mission. A patient in low Earth orbit could be stabilized and evacuated to Earth in the event of gross injury or urgent surgical disease. But if a patient is on the moon, it will be more difficult, or it will be more important to have the ability to perform surgery when medical management alone will not be sufficient. On the moon, there could also be the possibility for robotic telesurgery, since the technology in this field may have advanced considerably by the time the lunar station is created. Laparoscopy as a closed surgery technique follows the principle of minimally invasive surgery, with minimal opening of the skin and working within the body using cameras for visualization. On the lunar surface, there will be several advantages due to the presence of gravity. There will be less need for restraints for the patient and the medical crew. The patient will be more fixed to the examination or operating table, and the staff might not need the same attachment to the table or the floor in order to apply force to the patient. Open surgery may also be possible on the lunar surface because there will be less contamination of the operative field and cabin environment by blood, because there will be gravity to cause the blood to pool on the moon's surface. There may not be the need for containment devices to protect the patient and to maintain a clear surgical view. The cabin environment will also not need to be contaminated by blood in freefall, which is a biohazard that is difficult to disinfect, and when in LEO could interfere with electrical components in microgravity. Surgical instruments may not need a special management device to prevent a loss or contamination of instruments. The instruments could be placed on sterile operative trays near the operative field, just as on Earth. Through each of these advantages, medical care on the lunar surface could be remotely reinforced, especially during initial lunar operations, when other infrastructure could be lacking. With the addition of gravity, open surgical procedures may be possible to perform, which could make the difference in saving lives and ensuring individual well-being. Additionally, more space on the moon can facilitate the use of exercise equipment as well as nursing and rehabilitative care. Also, since the Lunar Space Medical Center is planned for approximately 20 years in the future, the emergence of new technologies for use in both medical care and research could be of great benefit. The fixed Earth gravity on the moon may prove to be insufficient in the maintaining of adequate bone density or in the prevention of muscle atrophy. Therefore, an exercise regimen needs to be implemented on the lunar surface that addresses this issue. Since any exercise weights delivered to the moon would have 1/6 the weight on the moon, the cost would be prohibitive to send free weights to the moon for use with exercise. Therefore, one solution could be exercise without free weights. The crew members at the lunar outpost could rely on exercise machines based on resistance instead of gravity. This would require the same type of resistive exercise equipment currently on the ISS. The Advanced Resistive Exercise Device, or ARED, is a multi-purpose exercise device used on the ISS. It uses vacuum chambers for constant resistance and flywheels for the variable resistance. It was created with an action and feel that mimics the force experienced when lifting weights on Earth. It is also compatible to facilitate transfer to space, and it has space heritage, with routine use on the ISS for almost 13 years. Another solution could use in situ resources, such as lunar regolith for exercise weights. For free weights, pulverized regolith could be added to specialized containers for exercise. An exercise machine that utilizes these in situ resources, such as regolith, could also be considered for use. Although the machine would be bulky and take considerable amount of room in the facility, to use local resources, containers of pulverized regolith could be attached to a machine that moves weights by lever and pulley mechanisms. This would have a similar action to exercise machines used on Earth that move weight plates via cable mechanism. Cardiovascular training will also be important. The type of conditioning is an essential part of a health maintenance regimen. Bicycle ergometers are one solution that are small, lightweight, simple to use and maintain, and they can also give feedback on performance. The settings and output can be tracked, and a person's performance can be evaluated over time. Currently on the ISS, there are two exercise bikes, the cycle ergometer with vibration isolation and stabilization in the US segment, and the velometer in the Russian segment. These types of ergometers are equipped with seats and body harnesses that could be used on a lunar surface with similar effectiveness. The vibration isolation and stabilization systems for these ergometers, however, would not be as necessary on the moon, unless there was a need to protect sensitive equipment or experiments from excessive vibration. Some athletes still prefer a treadmill. This type of device may also promote greater bone density with greater axial forces applied to the long bone of the legs during exercise due to the upright position. There are also two treadmills aboard the ISS which could be useful on the lunar surface too, the Russian treadmill and the combined operational load-bearing external resistance treadmill. This additional force will allow effective use of treadmill and will better simulate the force of gravity on Earth. Nursing care will likely play a larger role on the lunar surface than in LEO due to the fact the medical center will be serving a small to mid-sized settlement, similar to an Antarctic station or larger. For this reason, there will likely be a greater need for thorough, well-rounded, holistic care. For rehabilitation, this kind of care is not replaceable by medication or procedures. It is essential to proper recovery and will be provided to suit the needs of this Space Medical Center location. Crew training on the moon should be similar in preparation of medical and non-medical staff, just like the Space Medical Center in LEO. This will be essential for the exploration of the lunar surface. There will still need to be extensive training in routine and emergency medical care, and these procedures will need to be practiced in simulation before embarking on missions. Physiological and psychological care will also need to be reinforced, since these have been traditionally underrepresented areas of training for medical personnel. For training by telecommunications, the response time might be slightly delayed. Therefore, telesurgery could encounter difficulties, but two-way telemedicine is possible and will likely be a staple of the medical toolkit. Teleconferencing from the moon would also be an engaging avenue for education on Earth. Classrooms and conferences could be enthusiastic about the opportunity to meet and converse with these crew members on the moon. So to achieve a self-sustaining status, the settlement will need to implement the use of an artificial closed-loop ecosystem, mimicking what naturally occurs in Earth's biosphere. It is possible to create a contained system through utilizing processes such as nitrogen, oxygen, and water cycles. This can be done alongside the use of various microorganisms, humans, and higher plants for a biologically sustainable human population on the moon. The ISS currently uses a closed-loop system in ECLIS, whereby clean air and water are produced on board, thus minimizing the need for frequent resupply missions. There are also several closed-loop biological systems in development, including NASA's Advanced Life Support System testbed and the Microecological Ecological Life Support System alternative known as MELISSA. We could also assume a closed-loop system has been developed and functions efficiently with either zero or minimum waste or loss. The success of the settlement with regards to its self-sufficiency and interdependence from Earth will be largely dependent upon the effective functioning of such a system. Yes, the moon is out of reach for medical evacuation back to Earth, but it does not mean that we cannot subject the Space Medical Center to new methods of sustainability that will be essential for deep space missions. We can use this space as a testbed for the implementation of these essential methods, and in the unfortunate event that sustainability fails, resupply missions could be sent from Earth in a number of days or weeks. On the next slide, you'll see an overview of the Lunar Space Medical Center from the exterior. It will be much larger than the LEO module, though it will be costly to deliver building materials to the moon. The low gravity may be of benefit throughout the construction, and in situ materials can be used for additional support and for radiation shielding. Therefore, the radiation and micrometeoroid shielding can be less than that of LEO, which can save considerable weight and cost. An outer layer of water or regolith, plus an inner layer of radiosynthetic fungi or melanin provides an integrated shielding approach. Also, the Lunar Space Medical Center could potentially be constructed within a lunar lava tube, which could save considerably on the need for radiation shielding. Shielding architecture has also been incorporated into the design, with plants and living vegetation, reinforcing psychological well-being. A cupola window has also been attached to the top floor, and this permits natural light and some incredible views. A robust lunar communication system will be implemented with Earth-Moon comms relying on the Deep Space Network. And in the interest of rapid response, a lunar emergency rescue vehicle or an ambulance has been included. This will be able to dock with the lunar habitat to transport patients from a pressurized cabin to a pressurized habitat. On the next slide, you will be able to see the original high-level floor plan for the lunar base or Lunar Space Medical Center, with images from the 3D graphical representation below. The first floor shown on the right, it depicts the medical area, and the entrance module is composed of an airlock, decontamination zone, and a hallway with storage capacity. The second floor shown on the left depicts the research area for protein crystallization and stem cell research, among others. And in the center, a plant garden is included for research on self-sustaining agriculture with local resources. And this modular approach will allow for future expansion, which has been hypothesized on the next slide. An advanced Lunar Space Medical Center should be able to service upwards of 500 permanent settlers on the moon, possibly by 2060. The basic configuration is modularly extended and integrated into a larger structure, with a central node connecting all the medical center modules, as well as the newly introduced morgue. In the future, where a settlement on the moon could exist, a Lunar Space Medical Center could possibly require a morgue that can store corpses of dead people until autopsies or sustainable body disposals can be performed. The morgue would be attached to the Space Medical Center as one of its facilities, and therefore it would be under the same oxygen level and conditions. Bodies would be stored using refrigerators and to decrease decomposition. This is where an ecological method might make sense to be employed. The ecological method recycles corpses into useful soil and could be seen as a new beginning for the deceased. It may even help the society present in coping with death and strengthening the human relationship with nature cohabiting the settlement. However, the moral implications of having a morgue should also be considered. I have now taken you through the birth and life of our Lunar Space Medical Center, and now I'll pass it over to Laia, who will take you for a spin on our gravity wheel.
Thank you very much, Evan. After having studied the two scenarios to place a medical center on low Earth orbit and on the surface of the moon, our team would like to present to you our third scenario, the gravity wheel. Our team realized during our research that microgravity is one of the main factors that affects both human health and also the medical procedures that we aim to perform in our Space Medical Center. For this reason, our team thought that a Space Medical Center on a gravity wheel would have solved these problems. This way, we would be able to generate gravity by the centrifugal force when rotating the wheel and have the Space Medical Center operating in an environment similar to the one that we have on Earth. On the next slide, we will show you how we have performed several analyses to identify the potential activities on board of the Gravity Wheel Space Medical Center. We identified that we will be able to perform commercial activities. In the Gravity Wheel, there will be space for medical care and laboratory modules for space agencies' private research. The Gravity Wheel will be able to host the tourists that can afford it, as well as the required crew in order to support them. In addition, we would also have different configurable modules available according to the customer's needs. We also performed some calculations in order to find out how much money would be saved by installing gravity. We assumed a constant 400-person crew that spends approximately 2 hours a day exercising and an hourly rate of astronaut time of $10,000 US. We calculated that approximately $2.9 billion per year would be saved. This money was calculated from extrapolating the data from the ISS to 400 people. On the next slide, we will explain how we can use the gravity wheel as a medical and a research facility. The main difference between the Space Medical Center on low Earth orbit attached to the ISS or the one on the lunar surface with the Space Medical Center on the gravity wheel is that some medical procedures that are not possible in microgravity or with a lower gravity will become a reality. And some examples of this are CPR, intubation, and surgery. Regarding the research facility, since we would be able to control the rotation of the gravity wheel, we would be able to obtain research data for different gravities. For example, Mars gravity can be simulated, which could be used for astronaut training and exploring countermeasures and technologies in order to prepare ourselves for future Mars missions. Now, after having presented you our third scenarios, we would like to go to the next slide and present the religious, ethical, and legal considerations. We will start with the religious considerations. After having discussed these three possible scenarios, our team has also evaluated the role that religion plays in this facility. The importance of these disciplines imposes some constraints in the operations and protocols of the Space Medical Center. For this reason, we have identified the following areas that you can see on the slide: the death of a crew member, the different religious habits, the influence of religion in medical habits, as well as the influence of religion in decision-making. Regarding the death of a crew member, we know that due to the near-term commercialization of space, there will be an increased transit of people to space. And due to the extreme environments of the space environment, and also the different medical procedures and treatments that we aim to perform on our Space Medical Center, a sudden death or a critical situation where an individual is in danger of dying could occur. This possibility brings a constraint in the design and the operation of the medical facilities, to treat also with body storage and also the funeral rituals. Regarding the religious habits, we know that each religion shows a different type of lifestyle, and it has certain habits such as festivities, moments to pray, and days of the rest to meditate that should be taken into account on board of our Space Medical Center. We also want to highlight the influence of religion on medical habits, because it can impose certain constraints regarding the medicines taking, its view on concepts such as life-sustaining therapy, and other constraining procedures such as blood transfusion. Last but not least, we also wanted to highlight the importance of religion in decision-making, since each religion has a different view on morality. And we would like to link this with our next slide, where we will talk about the ethical considerations. As we have just mentioned, ethics and moral will influence a lot if we find ourselves in the Space Medical Center where an important decision needs to be made. Even though ethics do not hold the last word, they should be taken into account. We also wanted to highlight two other areas that we think are very important for ethical considerations, and these are resource limitation and privacy. Regarding resource limitations, we know that medical supplies will be limited on a Space Medical Center due to space and launch constraints. In case a resupply is not possible, the ethical point of view would be a constraint in the output of decision and rules regarding the rationalization of supplies. Regarding the privacy, in our Space Medical Center, the astronauts' data would be collected and analyzed in order to ensure their health and well-being and, of course, safety. This would suppose a loss of confidentiality and brings the ethical concern towards the right to privacy and the disclosure and use of clinical data. After having analyzed these ethical considerations, we would now analyze the legal considerations. Given that this project is intended to be an international collaboration, the international legal framework has been reviewed. We reviewed different international treaties, guidelines, and principles, and we tried to identify the key concepts that would affect our Space Medical Center. Here on the slide, you can see a list, but we will just mention some of them. For example, the utilization, the registration, the responsibility, collaboration, and liability. With our background analysis, we propose the implementation of two policies on our Space Medical Center: the Space Medical Center Agreement Proposal and the Physician-Patient Code of Conduct. Regarding the Space Medical Center Agreement Proposal, the utilization of the Space Medical Center shall respect space international law. For this reason, we propose that all entities that contribute to the work and operations of the Space Medical Center sign this agreement. This agreement basically provides a complementary description of how exactly the current treaties and principles in international law apply to our Space Medical Center. And it covers different topics such as the registration and ownership, the sharing of data and goods, and intellectual property. We also contemplate the possibility that international law will change and evolve, as well as our Space Medical Center, and we contemplate the possibility that we might need to revise this agreement and update it accordingly. Regarding the Physician-Patient Code of Conduct, this is the protocol that will be implemented to establish a behavioral protocol and response to in-flight medical events. And the main area that this Code of Conduct shall deal with are the following: For example, it shall deal with the physician-patient communication, the objectivity of the physician, the awareness of the physician regarding the challenges and risks that the crew members may face, the different types of monitoring on board of the Space Medical Center, the patient compromised, the different treatments, the rehabilitation, also emergency treatments, as well as the physician liability and the patient's rights and obligations. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Maxime, who will talk about the risk assessment of our Space Medical Center.
Thank you very much, Laia. So no system is without risk. Whether human illness or equipment failure, there is no system with zero risk. So in order to properly address the feasibility of the Space Medical Center configuration proposed, it is necessary to conduct an analysis of a risk affecting each environment and stage. So we decided to assess the risk through the following process. So first, we identified the end states, like hazards and failures, by evaluating the performance risk at the system level. Then we evaluated different risk scenarios linked to the medical equipment and the space environmental risks. Then we used a quantitative tool named FMEA, Failure Modes and Effects Analysis, to quantify this risk and the control of hazards. And based on the data we analyzed, we then calculated the risk priority number and produced an occurrence likelihood and severity matrix. So our results, we identified 15 high-level extreme priority risks, and we successfully mitigated 11 risks through this quantification. By following this process, we are trying to eliminate the risk at the root level, starting with this conceptual design phase. On the next slide, we will address the technology review. So as said before, the Space Medical Center is planned to be a top-level medical and research integrated platform. So the equipment for it has been selected to perform medical analysis, monitoring, treatment, and research studies in space. The technology readiness level of the equipment was assessed according to the NASA defined scale, and all the technologies selected have at least a TRL of 6 or above. Regarding the possible medical risk of long duration spaceflight, they were assessed, and among these are conditions that occur frequently, that are simple to treat, as headaches, and nausea, along with conditions that are rare but difficult to treat, such as appendicitis and sepsis. The potential technology were assessed based on their multifunctionality, risk relevance, and technology readiness level. For the multifunctionality criteria, we evaluated different purposes, such as research, biomolecular research, diagnostic, medical, and treatment. Other factors were also considered, such as volume, dimensions, costs, maintenance, reusability, life expectancy, and time performance. On the next slide, we will address the economic section of a Space Medical Center project. So we started by performing a market analysis at different levels and perspective of involvement. So we had to use estimation to compensate the data that doesn't exist yet. So obviously, the LEO region is the first zone to access and the least expensive one. So today, astronauts are composed by categories, and the first ones are institutional astronauts. They are selected by national space agencies and are the best candidate from both athletic and psychological aspects. However, private astronauts and space tourists are actually very likely to outnumber their institutional counterparts over the next decades. And in this segment specifically, personal wealth plays a major role, as it still represents a use constraint for most of the population. The other main customers we are targeting are researchers. So space-based research is an asset for companies to develop new technologies inside an environment that is not reproducible on Earth. So according to NASA, the main research activities performed in space environment can be grouped into biology and biotechnology, physical and material science, and technology development. So research and development activities performed there can lead to innovative applications that can be eventually used both in space and on Earth as spin-off. On the next slide, regarding the potential suppliers of the Space Medical Center, so the health and medical sectors offer a wide range of suppliers and equipment, representing a large market. And this is the reason why we decided to proceed by identifying the different players. Only a portion of these medical suppliers are offering products and meet the needs of the space agencies. So the table on the left shows potential suppliers for the Space Medical Center that have already partnered or supplied space agencies and are offering products and technologies for the space segment. The Space Medical Center, as stated before, will also provide research capabilities for many different domains. And from the right graph, it can be deduced that over 60% of the research equipment is supplied by the top 7 organizations listed. And of these 60%, we have approximately 45% of the overall supply, which comes from the space agencies as NASA, JAXA, and ESA. For the commercial marketplace, TechShot, University of Alabama, Bioserve, Astrium, and Thales Alenia will be key suppliers. On the next slide, you can see the business canvas we perform for the Space Medical Center that summarizes the main factors of a project. So if we start with the number 1, the customer segments, so we have agency astronauts and space tourists, which will permit to promote businesses to set up their activities in space, including research entities. Number 2, our value proposition. The Space Medical Center aims to provide optimal medical capabilities in LEO and eventually on the moon. For the different channels we will use to reach our customer, so we will use ad hoc advertising, as well as marketing campaigns and possibly social media to support. And once in space, telemedicine could represent an effective communicative tool to overcome urgent situations despite long distances. For number 4, customer relationship. So they will be direct, dedicated, and personal in order to respect the patient's privacy. Regarding revenue streams, so the Space Medical Center as a LEO module would serve a real-time market. So in this case, the pricing strategy will follow a dynamic approach on a case-to-case basis. And on the other hand, for the moon version, the 2 configurations would be proposed at a fixed price. For the resources, number 6, there will be 3 configurations. The module version for LEO and a basic or advanced configuration for planetary settlement. For the activities, it includes medical assistance in space or on the moon, and multiple test beds for different research activities. We have also miniaturized laboratories, which will be a key element available in microgravity. For the partners, obviously, they can be either private companies or space agencies, and they will facilitate the project implementation. And to conclude with this business canvas for the cost structure, so the cost of a LEO module will be similar to the ones associated with an ISS module. So based on that, we perform our cost calculation based on the Columbus module. And then for the 2 planetary version, they are estimated to cost at least the dual price of a module version under the current economic values. However, some technological developments may bring costs down. I will now pass it over to Graham, who will conclude.
Thank you very much, Maxime. So throughout this presentation, we've detailed 3 different scenarios in which a space medical center can exist. We want to hit every base. The most immediately available of which is the SMC LEO, which would function as an add-on module to the ISS. In the near future, we discuss the infrastructure and functions for a space medical center on the lunar surface. Our last scenario detailed plans for the future of long duration stays in space in which artificial gravity can be produced. In all of these scenarios, operations for patient care and training will be imperative. A commercial research plan was also included to augment a space industry that's becoming increasingly privatized. This is complemented by the dedicated section on how businesses can participate in the formation of a space medical center. Lastly, this is an ISU project and we aim to be as interdisciplinary as possible. Therefore, we would be remiss if we did not mention the importance of humanities as they relate to the ethics of extended stays in space. Further, this project would not be possible or accessible by all nations of the world unless a concerted legal framework exists prior to the construction of the Space Medical Center. This will take the form of a physician-patient code of conduct and agreements in the form of memorandums of understanding. In sum, the myriad functions of the Space Medical Center will be a necessity for the future of human spaceflight and exploration into deeper space. This requires the multifaceted and critical approach that we've taken in its construction and functionality. So from all of us on the Space Medical Center team, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you again to both NASA and CNES for the opportunity to show off our finished product. It was a pleasure to speak with you today, and we are happy to receive your questions at this time.
So thank you very much to Team Project Space Medical Center, a very impressive presentation. We now move into the Q&A section. I regret that for all those people out there watching on the internet and other people, the questions can be asked only by a select band. As I say, we have some of the project sponsors online, and we also have the faculty who, for assessment and evaluation purposes, need to ask the team some hard questions. So we're going to kick off the next 30 minutes with, first of all, with the sponsors. We're very pleased to be joined by Jim Green, the Chief Scientist from NASA, Louis Barbier, the Associate Chief Scientist from NASA, and Francois Spiro, who in his former role with CNES, the French Space Agency, was responsible for initiating this project as well. So I would invite Jim and Louis and Francois to ask questions in that order. I'm afraid because of the way that Zoom webinars work, you won't be able to see these people. And then after that, we will hand off to the ISU faculty, starting off with President Didalmo, who will ask the questions. So over to you, Jim.
Chris and team, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. As you know, I'd seen an earlier portion of it and really enjoyed it. One of the new concepts that's, of course, commercial entities are starting to think about is the ability to take remains, cremated remains to the moon and use the moon as a burial site. And I'm glad that you have started to think about that, address what may happen in a lunar village, and tackle some of the tough questions relative to whether that's the appropriate thing to do or not. What were some of the discussions that were around, that came around in terms of how one as a capability, as you proposed, would evolve relative to human remains? Can you give me a little flavor for what the pros and cons were that you discussed? In other words, do we bury them on the moon? Do we bring them back to the Earth? What would be the right thing to do as relative to the sensitivity of many cultures in the world that revere the moon as as a very special place, and have raised a number of objections in that area. Okay.
Yes, understood. Thank you very much for your question, Dr. Green. I would like to pass this question to our local expert, Laya.
Thank you very much, Dr. Green, for your question. Yes, we actually had a lot of discussions regarding this topic. We also thought about cremation, but then we were thinking about how to make this process more sustainable. And then we came up with this company called Recompose, and the idea that they propose is to use the bodies and put them with wood chips and allow thermophilic bacteria in order to decompose the bodies and turn these bodies into reusable soil. So what we thought was that in the future scenario of habiting the lunar surface, what we could do is use the same process and basically turn these bodies into human soil, and we would be able to grow plants from them, and it could not only help psychologically the inhabitants of the moon there, but would also be seen as a new beginning for the humans and the people habiting on the moon. So yes, we thought about cremation and other methods, but at the end we thought that it was better to think of a more sustainable way to treat with this issue. And regarding the Space Medical Center on low Earth orbit, our approach in this topic would be to, in case there's a death, to return the body to the Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris, over to you.
Okay, so Louis now. I've seen in the Q&A you already have a question, so go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Just fine.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so I put the question in the Q&A. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll just ask the one to start with. I wasn't clear on the purpose of the radiosynthetic fungi on the lunar base, and I was wondering if someone could just elaborate quickly on what's their function?
Yes, happily. Thank you for your question. I'll take this one. So for a little bit of backstory, I think we're all familiar with Chernobyl. A number of years ago, researchers found a type of fungus, actually several types of fungus, growing within the previously exploded nuclear reactors. And it was the first evidence that organisms can use radiation as an energy source. So it was deemed radiosynthetic or radiotrophy. And so they actually live off these low levels of radiation. And what makes that possible is the amount of melanin that the organism itself produces. So there are a number of researchers working on using microorganisms. The name of the bacteria is Cryptococcus neoformans, and you can basically maximize its production of melanin, extract it, and it comes out as a little black powder. This was done by Dr. Cordero down at Johns Hopkins last year. He flew it up to the ISS and he was measuring how does melanin actually shield from radiation. And so his results came back and it was shown that it can attenuate how much radiation reached this detector when melanin was in front of it. So what we were proposing for the lunar surface is, and it was a form of sustainable technology, was using organisms to produce this melanin for us so that we don't have to use these bulky, heavy, and therefore expensive materials in order to shield in space and on the lunar surface. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. That does clarify it a bit. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris, back to you.
Okay, and next is Francois Spiro, who played a key role in initiating this from one aspect of the SMC. So over to you, Francois. I know you have several questions.
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, and congratulations to the team. You've done a great job, excellent work, and excellent presentation as well. As was said before, CNES was one of the sponsors of this study, and I'm not talking right now on behalf of CNES because I'm currently outside of CNES, but I'm sure that CNES will say that it is satisfied with the work done. I have three questions or remarks, if I may. The first one is regarding the Lunar facility. At one point in time, it was said that there are 4 medical centers around the recreation garden. And I wanted to get a feedback to see if I understood correctly that we are talking of 4 facilities and not just one. And if yes, why? So that is the first question. The second question is regarding the risk assessment, which was presented towards the end of the presentation. And I particularly noted the TRL levels which are being considered for that. And the question is therefore, are the risks only related to technologies used, or are there other risks, medical risk, political risk, etc.? And the final point is it's somewhere between a comment and a question. For a medical center in space, in whatever configuration of the surface of the moon, in orbit, etc., one important issue from my perspective is miniaturization, because as we all know, the volume in various facilities outside the Earth is very limited. And also it's a question of mass of transportation from the Earth to whatever facility. So the question is whether you have thought on the issue of miniaturization. Thank you, back to you.
Thank you very much for your questions. We'll address them one at a time. I'm going to pass the floor to our local expert, Evan Slattery, on your first question on if there are 4 medical centers on the lunar habitat.
Graham, thank you so much. So just to clarify, can you bring back up the slides, Saemi, by any chance? These slides. So is this I'm pretty sure this is the slide you were referring to, Francois, right? And you were wondering why for 4 separate medical centers?
Yes, that's the slide.
Okay, so basically this was just our idea. We're looking at expansion into the future. Obviously, I think we projected to 2060 or whatever. So the idea here you're seeing basically the medical proportion of the facility of the settlement or whatever it might be. This could also be attached to a bigger settlement in general. This would just be the medical center aspect of this, almost we could call it a hospital almost, in the bigger scheme of a lunar settlement, a large lunar settlement, which could see a couple hundred of people living there. So the idea was, different medical centers with different capabilities. As we said in the closer or the not so far into the future one, we had everything in one building, so that was just, so obviously things were a bit too small, but as we get more space, you can have routine care in one place, you can have surgical care in one place, obviously you have your morgue at one end, and even the recreational garden could be used for, just as a nice place to go, and also as psychiatric and therapy, so all of the above. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks for the clarification.
Thank you very much, Francois.
So if I remember correctly, question 2 was about risk assessment and whether risks are related only to technology or if there are other risks such as medical and political risks involved. And for this question, I'm going to pass the floor to our expert, Maxime.
Thank you, Graham. And thank you very much, Dr. Spiro, for your question. So as we know, the Space Medical Center will have a variety of chemicals on board that could cause hazards, and such as like toxic contaminants, fire hazards, and radiation issues. So we based our risk analysis on the equipment, but also on the medical issues we could encounter. So we did, as we said earlier, an FME analysis, and based on the results we had for each of these risk scenario, we had to propose some mitigation action, a mitigation plan strategy to lower the risk, those risk consequences and likelihood of occurrence. So if I summarize, we assess the risk regarding the equipment and the medical issues, but regarding the political aspects, risk related, we didn't tackle this aspect specifically. We specifically focused on the technologies, equipment, and on the medical issues.
Thank you, Maxime.
Okay, and for this third question, it was on miniaturization, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to the extent to which we considered this within our project, right?
Yes.
Great. Yes, I can take this question. So we try to base using trends that have already occurred and specific examples such as the flow cytometer that's on the ISS right now. It was made specifically for use in space where the interior space is limited. So we understood that as time goes on, machines have gotten smaller. Their ability to do high throughput data collection is increasing while their physical size is decreasing. And something we've been taught almost every day in all of our classes is for every kilogram you send up, that's money. So if you can make it smaller, if you can make it lighter, do that. So that was an important part, especially because as we mentioned, resupply isn't always available if you're on the lunar surface, or it might take days. So smaller machines that can do more were definitely a large part of this project. I hope that sheds some light on your answer or question.
Yes, thanks a lot for the answer. And again, congratulations to the whole team. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to our sponsors. It's now time to hand over to the faculty. And in order, and I'm not going to interact in between, we have President Didelmo, Professor Goldman, Professor Hill, Professor Peters, Professor Stupa, Professor Sun, Professor Tejimula, Professor Wootring, and then me, and we have 15 minutes left. So if I could ask my colleagues to ask very focused questions and the team to give very focused answers, we will get through there, I hope. So over to President Didelmo.
Thank you very much, Professor Welch, and congratulations to the team for this excellent presentation. My question has to do with what you have learned since you submitted the team project report, which was a few weeks ago. In the meantime, you have attended elective courses, one of them on interstellar studies and possible future missions to really long distances that could include humans. Some of you have attended another elective on space omics, which has to do with biomedical experiments that allow us to collect thousands of data points at a time. And we can do this again every day, making it a very effective way of monitoring someone's health. So if you had to rewrite your team project on Space Medical Center, would you change, would you add anything based on what you have learned from these two electives? I suggest that you give very short answers, just with a key word or a short sentence. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Juan, for your question. I'll address the first part of that and then send the floor to Geraldine. I was in interstellar studies, and if we could rewrite this project, I wish we could have spent maybe a little bit more time gaining insight on how teams work together, because I think what happens in space actually paralleled what happens within our team, and how team dynamics impact the amount of work you can get done. And in space, that's the difference between surviving and not. So more in-depth look into how teams work together, especially if you're on an interstellar ship traveling 40 light years away, is incredibly important. And for the next part of your question, I'll send the floor to Geraldine.
Thank Thank you, Graham, and thank you, Professor, for your questions. So about the omic analysis, actually, we didn't talk a lot in this presentation about the place and the role of those analysis in the future. But in the report, we addressed that, and of course, we want to highlight here that it will be essential for a proactive strategy to monitor astronauts, because it's better to prevent than cure. So the thing with the omic analysis is that it allows to get personal data sets, and then to build personalized medicine for each astronaut. I hope it's...
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very clear answers, both of them. Over to Professor Goldman.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, students, for your presentation. It was a nice one. I've put my question on the chat, but now that you can hear me, my question would be about nosocomial diseases. So that's an issue on Earth. And also recently, we have learned quite a bit about airborne diseases. So my question would be, is this a special concern for the SMC? Is it just the same as on the ISS right now? And if not, what would be the way to handle those diseases?
Yes, I think this, thank you very much for your question, Dr. Goldman. I think this could also be answered in part by myself and Geraldine. The first thing I'll say here is, yes, there are airborne diseases that can happen, especially in enclosed space, and they can also develop resistance to ways of treating it. The difference is what makes the Space Medical Center more equipped to handle that is the fact that it is the first dedicated module to medical care. Currently on the ISS, there are kits, there are racks that are more or less scattered about, but there isn't one dedicated place that houses all of these things. And so the Space Medical Center will benefit from that kind of organization and the central hub for ways of addressing the issue of airborne diseases. Geraldine, if you'd like to add to this, please do.
I think you say a lot. The one thing that maybe we can point out is that recently it has been shown that new space age were specific from the environment of ISS. So that is the species that we never have found before. So currently we are investigating this impact on the microbiome on board the ISS.
All right, thank you for your answer. I pass the floor to Professor Hill.
Good afternoon all, and heartiest congratulations to SMC. Question, what lessons did you as a team learn from the space tourist experiences of people like Richard Garriott in 2008, who had surgery prior to his flight?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hill, for your question. So yes, there have been documented cases of private citizens and essentially space tourists. I think the best way of addressing your question here would be in the form of one of our recommendations, which is the fact that there should be an existing infrastructure for healthcare that extends into space, and it covers these kinds of issues before they arise. Obviously, having any medical complications before you go up into space is an issue, and private citizens can get around this if they have their own equipment. But having healthcare and using the diagnostic tests associated with that would help screen people to avoid the complications before they happen in space. I hope that addressed your question.
Yes, thank you so much. May I pass the floor to my colleague, Professor Peters?
Thank you very much, Hugh, and I join everybody with congratulating the team. By the way, I never saw the 3D video. That's quite impressive, I must say. There is a facility in Strasbourg, a telemedicine facility, and if you come into that facility, you see on a big wall all sorts of names of medical provider companies like Siemens and so. And the people dealing with that, like Dr. Maresco told me that nearly the whole facility was financed by these people just for image. Is this something you have ever thought about in trying to get serious financial support of sponsors who would like to have their name attached to that facility?
Thank you very much, Dr. Peters, for your question. I think our expert, Maxime, would be best equipped to answer this. Maxime, over to you.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you very much, Dr. Peters. Regarding funding and sponsors and investments, so investors in both space and medical fields, private investors, they expect high returns in a relatively short time. So first, we were thinking that private funding was not the first option to go to from a point of view of the SMC. Maybe the best way was to treat it as a private-public partnership with government agencies providing the initial funding. But we also looked, after we looked at the different private commercial suppliers for the medical aspect of the SMC, we actually looked at different suppliers in Europe, but we must say that most of them are actually, we found that supply the ISS and other space agency are located in the US as a TechShot, BioServe, and so on. So we actually thought about in our plan to maybe look for sponsors. So by doing marketing campaign, ad hoc advertising, and also be active on social media. So that is something that we looked for. But I would say that the first path that we will use will be to look for private-public partnership with possibly space agencies.
Okay, that's good. A good track, PPP. Thank you very much, team, and congratulations again. And I hand over to my colleague Daniela now.
Okay, thank you, Professor Peters. So congratulations to team for an excellent presentation. So in my understanding, space medical care in LEO will be used only for astronauts. So my question is, do you have an option that this medical center can be open as well for individuals which will be a part of new medical research, meaning that these individuals will be only located in a medical center as a patients?
Thank you very much for your question. Just to clarify, are you asking if, say, non-agency astronauts can use the Space Medical Center?
Yes, only like, if someone wants to be a volunteer or to be a test bed for the new medical research, to test some new equipments or some drugs or etc. Mm-hmm. And be as a patient there, like, or be as a test bed, or it be like a patient who will be treated against some disease or something.
Okay, thank you.
Be open for the public, let's say like this. Okay.
Yes, great. So two things. So Maxime brought up public and private partnerships that are increasing. I believe Axiom recently said they're going to be sending up private astronauts to the ISS. And so the other thing that came to mind when you asked your question was the obligation, I believe this is in the Outer Space Treaty, the obligation of nations to assist others should they be in an emergency in outer space. And so if the Space Medical Center is equipped and they are able to, then yes, they would more or less have an obligation to help this person in space. But again, as I previously mentioned, the importance of a healthcare system that gets ahead of these problems before an emergency happens in space will be important in kind of trailblazing how these situations unfold. So short answer, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I pass the floor to Professor Sun.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello?
We can?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. First of all, and congratulations for your excellent presentation. And for my question is that is for your team project for the Space Medical Center. And so it's, in my understanding, is for the medical or the health, medical care or health care. And during the presentation, you mentioned also a lot of activities, for example, like the space science application and Earth environmental control and life support. And what's your consideration? And to put also these two activities, and I mean the life science and also environmental control and life support into your medical center as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sum, for your question. Just to clarify, yes, Sammy, if you could go to the slide, that would be great. So yes, you're asking about the various functions besides the medical aspect, correct?
Which is performed, I mean, for the test is in the space station already. And so you want to centralize all these kind of things to your center, right?
Mm-hmm. I think I can address your question here. We based a lot of, you mentioned life support, and we based it off of pre-existing technology like ECLIS in the ISS because it's already there, especially when we're talking about the LEO module. It can be adapted to what's already existing. I hope that addresses some of your question.
To Taiwo.
Okay, so yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and I want to join all other colleagues to congratulate this team for a very good job, and I wish you all the best. I have a simple question about the communication architecture you presented earlier. So I want to ask you, did you think about the possible security issue? And also, this architecture, are you looking at radio or probably optical communication system? That's my question.
Thank you very much, Taiwo, for your question. I think our resident expert, Sayami, would be best equipped to answer this. So please, Sayami, after you.
Hi. So Taiwo, just to clarify, you were asking about the radio frequencies?
Correct.
Yes. So we proposed KU band, KA band, and S band. But of course, we will have to run trials because, for example, for the ISS, several frequencies were selected at the beginning, but nowadays other frequencies are used. I mean, the same frequencies, but for another use. So we are proposing these 3 frequencies, but we will have to run trials after the module is up there to select those bands.
Okay, thank you. So I pass the floor to Vautrin, Professor Vautrin. Thank you.
Thank you, Taiwo, but in the interest of time, I'm going to hand the floor back to Chris Welch.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we are running a little short on time. And in fact, I am going to donate my question to NASA because I know that Louis Barbier has an additional question. So Louis, over to you for the last question, and then we'll finish the Q&A.
Okay, well, thanks, Chris. So very quickly, early on, it was mentioned that your thought psychological care was important. So my question was, are you saying it's a requirement to have a psychologist on the lunar or deep space crew? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Short answer, yes. We actually did a lot of analysis of this kind of question. We looked into things like how colors make you feel. What it'd be like standing in a crater where you can't see the planet, where everyone you've ever known was born. And how will people deal with that? Even if you're in the Space Medical Center in Leo and you're inside and there's no window outside and it just feels like a cold metallic room, we wanted to humanize the experience as much as possible. And as you can learn from any team, whether it's on Earth or in space, the importance of knowing your teammates is imperative for mission success. So yes, a psychologist would be required for getting teams to work together. And I also believe that my colleague Evan Slattery would like to add to this as well.
Yes, of course. Thank you for your question. I think Graham hit the nail in the coffin there with, psychologists are very important in this crew, but it's also essential that this person is interdisciplinary in many fields. So it's not just a psychologist astronaut. They're trained in psychology very well, but they're also very good at other things. It could be building, it could be other medical care. So I think, yeah, with that addition and, those key elements of including a psychologist, I think it is important.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. That brings us to the end of the Q&A for Team Space Medical Center. So you can step down now and relax. Congratulations on a very good presentation and a very good Q&A. Very pleased with the way that has gone. Of course, now this means we need to turn our attention to, TP Oceans. So we're going to take a short break now. We're going to recommence in 13 minutes at quarter to the hour or 45 minutes past, depending on how you want to see that. I would like to say, in conclusion, a thank you to our sponsors, to Jim Green and Louis Barbier and Francois Spiro for their participation. If you can stay on for the next team project presentation as well, we would be delighted to have you, but we understand what with work and with time zones and everything else that may be complicated. So thank you again to everyone, to the team, to the faculty, to the other students in the team who also did the work that has been presented by the people you've seen on screen today. Let's not forget them. And we will see you back here again in 13 minutes. That's 45 minutes past the hour. Thank you all very much.
Chris, thanks so very much for inviting us. And it was a delightful presentation. Bye now.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, so hello, Team Oceans. I say, looking at all these multiple little pictures of people with, you know, that nice kind of pale blue icy background. It's suddenly a different sensation from SMC. So no, it's all looking good. Do we have everybody we're expecting? Cross-check with my next list to see that you're all here. So we have Julia, yes. We have Finn, yes. We have Laura, yes. We have Sammy, yes. We have Nigun, we have Stanislav, and we have Hashitha. Okay, so the team is all here. You know, we have a luxurious 8 minutes until we start. Are there any questions that you have before we kick off? And I'm just going to turn my light back on, which helpfully suddenly turned itself off automatically. It's recently developed an overheating problem. So any questions before we go? This time my introduction will be very, very short because you know, I did all the major intro stuff. So I'm just going to go, welcome back everybody over to Team Space and Oceans. So it's literally going to be that short.
Okay, so my question is about the Hangout chat. Should I take it open? Because I see that there is a sound.
Absolutely. The Hangout chat is how we do all the, you know,
because you can see the sound, right?
Right. Hang on a sec. I've just had a message on the Hangout chat that says we're live. I don't know.
Yeah, we're still live.
Okay, that's good. So all the things that we didn't want to talk about, you know, in public are being streamed on YouTube. So IT, could you, you know, I mean, it's nice to be here, you know, maybe it's good for our social media followings, but could you take us off being live? No, they can't. Okay. So for all those of you who are watching out on the internet, you know, welcome to the backstage all access pass area of the MSS team project. So you see here your dedicated space and oceans team who are getting ready to present. Not quite what we had in mind, I have to say. But at least you get to see us. Yeah, we're just setting up to launch in 6 minutes. I suggest if anyone has any questions, especially if they're potentially embarrassing ones, we do them via the Google Hangout chat rather than asking them, you know, online in a format which will be recorded for posterity. There's a thought. It's much easier when we do this in person, I have to say, with everyone in the room. Don't see any immediate questions on the Hangout.
Just a very quick question, whether you hear me well. Okay.
We do, Stanislav, yep.
Just change the microphone.
Okay, apparently this bit will be edited out, so only those people currently live viewing will be, you know, in their future lives they will say, I remember when I saw that little bit that no one else saw. So definitely backstage, all areas access pass. Well, as I say, you know, in 5 minutes we will appear. I will give a very short introduction and then it's over to you guys. You know, good luck with the presentation. From what I saw earlier, it looks like it's in very good shape. For the Q&A, we have no sponsors, so it'll be the faculty only. see you on the other side. And I'll be back in 4 minutes. Bye for now. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody, after the break. I'm pleased to say that we now have Space and Oceans who are ready to present. So without any more ado, I will hand over to the MSS21 team project Space and Oceans for their presentation. Over to you.
Okay, so welcome everyone and thanks for joining us today. So first of all, we would like to congratulate the team, Space Medical Center, for their great presentation. Congratulations. So my name is Giulia and I am speaking from Rome, and I will share the presentation as moderator together with my colleague Sami. Today, we will present our team project about space and oceans. with a primary focus on how space assets and technologies can be applied to track plastic pollution in the Arctic Ocean. As you may already know, the Master of Space Study is an interdisciplinary, intercultural, and international program, and our team fully respects these characteristics, having 15 members coming from different countries and with various backgrounds. We are engineers, life scientists, economists, but also archaeologists and geologists. This is the organogram of our team, namely our internal structure. And as you can see, we are 2 coordinators, Sami and myself, with executive and advisory competences. There is also an editing team, and there are 2 social coordinators. But all of us contributed to the final work, working remotely from different locations. For example, Meli, she's working from Africa, while Kenneth, Finn, and Arya are currently working from the United States. So we approached the project from 4 main questions that will be answered during the presentation. First of all, why is plastic pollution a problem? Second, why should we care about the Arctic Ocean? Third, can space technology help? And 4, how can we spread the word? At the end, we will follow on with our recommendations of what we need to be done for a better use of space applications from our perspective. But so far, we've talked about the what. But before we start addressing these questions, we should also talk about the why and how. And at this purpose, may I pass the floor to my colleague Sami, who will now introduce our project.
Thank you, Julia, and hello, everyone. My name is Sami. I'm Luxembourgish. I have a background in aerospace engineering, and today I'm talking to you from France. Our team realizes that everything we do impacts our environment. So we felt especially drawn to this quote from Jane Goodall. We were also very lucky when the topic of space and oceans was selected for our team project, especially since this is a very relevant topic, as you will see on the next slide. We have here a selection of headlines concerning plastic pollution in oceans that have made the headlines very recently. So on the left, for example, you have recent newspaper headlines. On the top right, you have an example of a symposium that was called about plastic pollution in the Arctic. Below that, you have academic papers which deal with the problem of plastic pollution. On the next slide, I'll give you more information about the structure of the project. So the aim of the project is to understand how we can monitor and track plastic pollution from space. And this is also what we did. The project focus was decided to be the 6th gyre, plastic gyre, which is forming in the Arctic Ocean. A gyre is a large system of circulating ocean that with currents in a particular spot amasses amounts of debris. But more information on that later on. On the next slide, I'll give you more details about the methodology we used for this project. We adopt a mixed approach to understand how space can monitor the plastic pollution and the oceans at the same time. We mainly covered the problem by its impact on policy, its current state of management from the different countries. We then looked at the impact on the society and the environment. We also analyzed the science behind the problem of plastic pollution and how it impacts on all levels. Finally, we could research the space technologies that will help in tracking, monitoring plastic pollution in oceans. We gather this information from multiple sources, such as academic and published literature and databases, but we also conducted many interviews with specialists, as you will see later on in the acknowledgements list. These interviews were very crucial because they helped us overcome the gaps we found in the literature. I'll give you now more an introduction in the topic itself. So, plastic pollution has a profound impact on all levels of the economy, impacting both land and marine ecosystems. Microplastics are a threat to human health when inhaled or ingested and can lead to financial losses for coastal businesses, fisheries, vessels, and tourism. There are currently 5 well-documented plastic gyres located in various oceans around the world. However, a 6th gyre is starting to form in the Arctic Ocean. This presentation will discuss the outcomes of the 6th Arctic gyre, how it can be monitored and prevented using space-based technologies in tandem with other useful airborne and waterborne techniques. Satellite services, in particular, Earth observation, have proven to be very useful in understanding the changing dynamics of the plastic pollution patches and can differentiate between different types of plastic in the oceans. On the next slide, I'll highlight some important facts about plastic pollution. So on the left, accumulation of pictures, you see examples of microplastics. These are plastic debris that is about 5 millimeters big or smaller. In the middle, you have a selection of pictures showing you examples of macroplastic, which is a plastic debris defined to be at least 5 millimeters big. On the right, you will find a selection of accumulated debris in ocean. So this is how a big patch of plastic pollution looks like in the waters. May I pass the floor to my colleague Laura, who will answer the first question, which is why plastic pollution is a problem.
Thank you, Sammy. So my name is Laura. I'm from the UK. I have a background in biomedical sciences, and I'm speaking to you today from France. Literature is limited in regard to the ways in which plastic pollution influences society and vice versa. This may be, in part, due to the difficult nature of quantifying such an endeavour. Indeed, characterising the impact of plastic pollution on society in respect to legal, national, and international scales is challenging. A study conducted by the Marine Pollution Bulletin determined the plastic pollution costs $2.5 trillion per year. In total, a conservative amount of $5.3 to $14 billion is lost every year due to plastic cleanup in Asia from river plastic pollution alone. When discussing how the planet has become so vast in plastic waste, it is important to recognize that many businesses, plastic production or sale, are cynical on the economic advantage and disadvantages of addressing such pollution. Cleaning up 1% of plastics per year is estimated to cost between 122 to $489 million per year, not including equipment and labor costs. The problem is the significant body of evidence that plastic is not only in the seas, but also in the marine life, and ultimately the humans that eat it. Human health adverse effects remain of intense debate, although there is a growing agreement that plastic and their additives are not as harmless as they were once thought to be. This will be represented in the next slide. Cellulose and microplastics have been found in non-neoplastic and cancerous lung cells. Originating from patients with multiple types of lung cancer, these particles have shown no degradation, supporting the possibility that they would be biopersistent. In the figure, you can see that the human trachea is wide enough to allow plastic fibers to enter the deep lung. These are resistant to clearing processes, causing acute or chronic inflammation, which may lead to other potential health problems, such as gastritis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, inflammatory bowel disease, and more. In the next slide, I will discuss a figure showing the increase of plastic over the years. This figure here shows that from 1950 to 1989, plastic production has multiplied by 100. This is due to an economic increase. Then, from 1989 to 2002, the production rate of plastic has doubled. The plastic industry vastly expanded, and it is now impossible to imagine life without it. Next, I will discuss the 5 plastic gyres. This figure shows the 5 main gyres. Plastic here is trapped within currents, producing negative effects, and once trapped, this plastic accumulates. The locations of these gyres are the North Atlantic, South Atlantic, Indian Ocean, North Pacific, and South Pacific Ocean. However, a 6th plastic gyre is now forming, which will be discussed later. In the next slide, we indicate the major sources of plastic pollution and the currents that drive them. When plastic enters the ocean, it follows different routes, circulating via ocean currents. Plastic can be expelled from ships, shorelines, or landfill, and guided into various drifts and directions, as shown in the figure above. Due to the combination of meteorological conditions, weather, and wind flows, currents have generated gyres of garbage patches representing a wide zone of contamination. Ocean floor currents direct these microplastic. Visual representation of different currents and transport and accumulation and distribution of microplastics is shown above. Along the shelf currents, microplastics disperse. High gravity currents then direct this microplastic into the ocean floor, and thermohaline currents segregate microplastic into localized concentrated patches. I now pass the floor back to my colleague, Julia.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So to summarize, Laura answered the question, why is plastic pollution a problem? She told us that plastic has deleterious effects on biological life, environment, and economy. That consumption of plastic increased significantly since 1950. That there are 5 plastic gyres in different areas of the planet, in the North and South Pacific, in the Atlantic, in the Indian Ocean, and possibly one is forming in the Arctic. 4, that there are different sources of pollution, such as landfills and ships. So now may I pass the floor to my colleagues, Finn and Arshita, who will try to answer the following question. Why should we care about the Arctic?
Thank you, Julia. My name is Finn. I'm Greek American. My background's in economics and energy environmental policy, and I'm speaking from the United States. So to begin with the Arctic territory, there are 8 states that make up Canada, United States through Alaska, Russia, Norway, Greenland through Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, and Finland. Within the circle, the Arctic directly sustains the lives of 4 million people that depend on its marine ecosystem, abundance of natural resources, seaports, growing tourism, marine wildlife, and research opportunities. The increasing amount of plastic, though, in this region puts these opportunities and communities at risk. There are 2 main shipping routes, the Northwest Passage on the left in red, and the Northern Sea Route on the right in green, with over 30 shipping ports populating the area. In terms of geopolitical concerns, the Arctic acts as a buffer zone between major superpowers, the US and Russia, making one of the most important sea areas in the world. Initially, the emergence of these undiscovered resources, new shipping routes, and new commercial interests have sparked concerns over territorial claims and rights to minerals. Under the UN Convention on the Laws of the Seas, coastal states have the right to explore and extract resources within their exclusive economic zones. Beyond these zones, though, there are new bids by Russia to claim territories that Canada and Denmark contest, while Canada is claiming ownership over parts of the Northwest Passage that are adjacent to it. Most recent in 2007, fishing rights were resolved, but there were disputes between Norway, Finland, Iceland, and Russia over the Barents Sea. The Arctic is also important in regulating Earth's climate. Next. Thank you. For regulating the Earth's climate, there are two systems I'll discuss. The thermohaline circulation. This is known as Earth's refrigerator. It's a circulation system or natural heat and saline-driven process that regulates Earth's ocean temperatures. The system uses ocean currents for transporting heat from the equator to the polar regions. Warm water is transported away from the equator northward, while cold water is transported southward. The thermohaline circulation system also acts as a conveyor belt for plastic pollution to travel upwards via the currents getting caught in the Beaufort Gyre. The second system is the ice albedo feedback loop. Albedo is a metric to calculate the reflectivity of light surfaces. Open water reflects roughly 6% of solar radiation, while sea ice reflects 50 to 70%. With the addition of snow on top, the reflectivity reaches about 90%. This feedback loop is important in regulating Earth's temperatures. During sea ice regrowth, debris and plastic pollution get trapped inside the ice. Although the presence of this plastic does not hinder the growth of the ice, high concentrations of microplastic in the Arctic have shown to alter the albedo and interfere with the natural processes in salinity. As sea ice is replaced by floating plastic patches, it reduces the number of surfaces for light to reflect off of, resulting in further sea ice melt and warming of oceans. There are many space technologies currently that are monitoring these effects. In the next slide, I will discuss the formation of the sixth plastic gyre. So the Arctic Ocean and the polar ice caps are governed by the natural processes of the Coriolis effect, induced wind and water circulation, thermohaline currents, and the bordering land masses. The Coriolis effect is a complex geophysical rotational effect that deflects various movements. These forces result in the Beaufort Gyre and the transpolar drift, as labeled on the diagram. And these cycle sea ice and debris across the Arctic. Air and wind interactions with surface currents appear to be a main driver for the migration of sea ice from the Arctic to the Greenland Sea, and are accelerating the circulation of the Beaufort Gyre more as the ice retreats. This interaction is stymied by heavy ice coverage, but melting ice shows greater impacts of the Arctic air currents on the Beaufort Gyre's motion, including the transpolar drift current. As these patterns gain more energy, they result in stronger currents, which draw debris from the North Atlantic and the North Pacific Oceans, two of the most polluted gyres in the world. The same wind-driven surface currents also appear to be responsible for the large volume of lightweight foam plastic that are driven out of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and appear in the Arctic Ocean. Other explanations for small particle sizes can be traced to microplastic particles found in the snow, brought from thousands of kilometers from south, that are carried on north-moving air currents. Though these wind and water circulation movements, the Arctic is considered a dead end or sink for marine debris, thus establishing the formation of the sixth plastic gyre. I now pass the floor to my colleague Harshita, who will talk about the socioeconomic aspects relating to plastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Finnegan. I'm Harshita. I'm from India, and my background is in information science and engineering. And today I'm speaking to all of you from Strasbourg, France. The Arctic Ocean holds various economic opportunities, which seems to be indirectly contributing to the formation of the sixth plastic gyre. Now let us review how the shipping routes pose a challenge to the Arctic marine debris. The Arctic sea ice concentrations are projected to decrease and almost disappear by the year 2050, revealing the transpolar sea route, as you can see here in the figure, located entirely in international waters. Therefore, opportunities to expand global shipping through the Arctic present itself. The traditional East Asia to Northern Europe shipping route through the Suez Canal, going from Rotterdam to Yakoma, takes 11,200 nautical miles, but only 6,500 nautical miles through the Transpolar Sea route, therefore shortening travel times by almost 12 to 15 days. A significant economic benefit that Russia, the United States, and China are keen to exploit. Fishing gear such as nets and lines are the most commonly identified macro debris and compose approximately 46% of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch mass, and fishing buoys are the greatest contributor to the plastic debris mass as well. Should transport routes through the Arctic increase, plastic pollution, both intentional and accidental, will increase greatly. This debris can also cause damage to equipment, and shipping vessels injure crews and also occupy their time with cleaning and repairs. Therefore, this calls for continuous monitoring of the shipping trade routes to determine the cause of plastic pollution of the new trade routes that could bring to the Arctic economically. Now, in the next slide, we shall discuss some of the challenges faced by both wildlife and indigenous communities of the Arctic. Indigenous people, although living in isolation from Western society, are indirectly affected by it. For instance, the plastic debris from the shipping activities as discussed in the previous slide. The indigenous people are known to consume almost 4 times more seafood than the global average, simply because fish is a vital part of their traditional diet. And these pollutants eventually find their way into the Arctic ecosystems and biomagnify through food webs. Medical screenings of the indigenous community showed great risk of negative health effects such as hypertension, fluctuation in hormone levels and immune function, tissue and bone density, also neurological and behavioral effects. Further studies indicated high levels of pollutants in Inuit mothers compared to the rest of the general population, therefore jeopardizing reproduction levels. Similarly, this brings the Arctic wildlife also at stake due to the lack of waste management. The rate of recycling is, however, low in the Arctic, and the absence of incineration plants can result in open waste dumping sites that are close to the shore. These open waste dumping sites attract polar bears and seabirds who mistake the garbage contents as edible food and consequently ingest them, leading to unfortunate events. Now, in order to maintain a plastic-free lifestyle up at the Arctic, we now in the next slide discuss the integrated political framework. The Arctic Ocean relies on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships to regulate plastic pollution, but on a global level. But now which we relay down to the Arctic Council along with scientific cooperation and also subgroup inclusions on a regional level to formulate an action plan on marine litter to break them down locally into context-specific challenges. Although an Arctic treaty would be desirable, the presence of a different nation makes it difficult to agree on binding decisions. However, this diversity can be seen as an added value and a valuable tool when it comes to protecting the environment. The Arctic Council has great potential to become an effective mechanism that models the regional governments. Now, may I pass the floor back to my colleague, Sami? Thank you.
Thank you, Harshita. To sum up, we saw that Finn explained the economic opportunities that will open up in the Arctic due to the sea ice melt that could contribute to greater plastic pollution. Furthermore, he mentioned how the Arctic is critical for regulating the Earth's climate. A sixth gyre is forming in the Arctic from natural processes of the Coriolis effect, induced wind, and water circulation, thermoline currents, and bordering land masses. Harshita went on by explaining the gyre's impact on sustaining the livelihood of marine and human populations. She also explained to us that currently there is no Arctic treaty, but with scientific, Diplomacy, an intergovernmental framework can be established to protect the Arctic region. May I now pass the floor to my colleagues, Nikun, Stanislav, Hashita, and Finn, who will answer the question on how space technologies can help.
Thank you, Sami, and greetings to everyone. My name is Nikun, and I'm from India. I have a background in aerospace engineering, and I speak to you from France. First, we'll talk on what should space technology do. Earth monitoring tools from space are accessible everywhere and often require no special computer or installing a specific software. It is possible to observe the whole planet if the right combination of satellites and orbits are chosen. Earth observation instruments allow to take very accurate images, thus resulting in the detection of plastic debris. As mentioned earlier, marine plastic debris can be classified into macroplastics, mesoplastics, microplastics, and nanoplastics. Due to its properties, plastic is sensitive to photodegradation effect responsible for transforming macroplastics into microplastics. This project aims to track and monitor microplastics within the Arctic region in order to counteract the creation of another plastic debris gyre, as well as accumulation of macroplastics from sinking due to biofouling and ballasting, contributing to the formation of micro and nanoplastics. On the next slide, I'll talk on the considerations of Earth observation for the Arctic region. In general, there are 5 primary aspects to consider Earth observation to properly track plastic pollution. These include temporal, spatial, spectral capability, signal strength, and orbit. The satellite's temporal resolution needs to collect near real-time information. The spatial resolution needs to be high enough to detect an accumulation of floating debris, and also depends on the type of plastic debris it should track. The satellite's spectral resolution depends on the coverage of the aim location. Using spectroscopy analysis, the spatial resolution can distinguish plastic debris from natural sources of plastic debris and seawater. Orbital parameters help to determine the coverage of the satellite. A sun-synchronous polar orbit or a highly elliptical mole-near orbit would be required to cover the Arctic region. The signal needs to be strong enough so that it is not undermined by the atmosphere and its effects, such as clouds and ionospheric scintillation. On the next slide, I will give you more details of the parameter monitored with satellites. Water temperature is very influential in the global climate. Roughly 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans. Over extended time periods, the oceans can retain more absorbed solar heat than the atmosphere on the land. The prevailing ocean currents are driven primarily by differing water densities, winds, and tides. The differences in water density are typically driven by difference in temperatures, salinity, and other dissolved salts. El Nino and La Nina are greatly influenced by background seasonal changes. They show major variations in the spatial structure and seasonal evolution. These cycles cause periodic changes in the Pacific Ocean surface temperatures, which impact the global weather. These cycles last for 9 to 12 months and occurs every 3 to 7 years. During El Nino, temperatures near the equatorial region are hotter and drier due to the equatorial waters flowing along the surface of the ocean. Under El Nino conditions, the westerly winds are weaker and permit more precipitation in much of South America. During La Nina, temperatures near the equatorial region are colder and wetter than normal. In this scenario, the east-west trade winds strengthen and the warm surface waters are pushed west across the Pacific. El Nino and La Nina are important to understand the circulation of plastics in the subtropical gyres. although little evidence are found to confirm a direct impact. The relationship between seasonal events and plastic debris accumulation patterns could contribute towards the fluctuation of plastic accumulations in gyres, the rate at which plastic degrade and facilitate the transportation of debris to other oceans. On the next slide, I'll provide more information about monitoring ocean currents with Earth observation. Heat transportation is a factor to consider as the cold wind moves from the poles and the hot wind from the equator, driving the gyre's rotation. The wind-driven circulation is a type of ocean circulation where water circulation and regulation of factors such as temperature, salinity, and nutrient flow takes place through the globe by the gyres. The winds from the poles and the equator will force the water to turn 90 degrees if it's from the North Pole, and to the left if it's from the South Pole, and downward in a circle to a depth less than 100 meters. This phenomenon is known as Ekman pumping. As the current is going more in depth, horizontal differences in the salt concentration and temperature are called the thermohaline circulation, which is the second type of ocean circulation. The image shows tropical gyres, associated ocean currents as a result of hot wind coming from the equator and the cold ones from the poles. On the next slide, we'll show you a few satellites that are used to monitor the oceans. The image on the left shows the Sentinel-3 satellite series. The image on the center shows the Neo-Pelides satellite, which is scheduled to be launched in 2021. The image on the right shows the Sentinel-6 satellite, which was launched on November 2020. Now, I now pass the floor to my colleague Stanislav, who will talk on the different sensors to monitor the ocean.
Thank you, Nigu, and hello, everyone. My name is Stanislav. I have a background in software engineering. Today, I talk to you from Kiev, Ukraine. During the project, I've been working with the technical part and would like to append a few words about space technologies that could be used to monitor plastic patches. Essentially, there are two types of perspective approaches that can be used. The first one is radar imaging, and on the left-hand side, you may see an awesome picture from the Sentinel-1 satellite, which carries synthesized aperture radar on board. This is a post-processed image that is taken from Topozalis and Papakonstantinou research on plastic patches. We clearly see the plastic target in DC, thus confirming that synthesized aperture radars can be used for plastics detection. Nevertheless, the disadvantage of this method is that we cannot tell this object from any other objects, for example, ships. The other approach is optical observation, for example, the reflectance spectroscopy. And its principle is based on measuring the reflectance of a target object for a specific wavelength. Then, for several wavelengths, these data are combined to build a reflection pattern which is specific for any chemical compound. After this, the result is compared with the database to find the best correspondence. This method demonstrates good efficiency when used from space, as it allows to distinguish different objects on the water surface. A good example you may see on the right-hand side, where the laboratory transmission spectrum of the polycarbonate, common plastic, is demonstrated. Here you may see that it's almost completely transparent in the visible spectrum and reflects all wavelength in the near-infrared range. Next slide, please. Based on Lauren Bierman's research, we also conducted our own experiment to check our ideas, understand possible problems and directions of optimizations. We have used infrared reflectance spectroscopy to confirm that we can detect plastic targets. To do this, we have collected raw data from Sentinel-2B satellite, and as these images are very big, for example, a set containing images with all wavelengths takes around 7 gigabytes. We haven't managed to find any relevant software for image analysis. So in order to process it, quickly build the spectral patterns, relevant software utilities have been written. As different images have different resolutions, they were resampled to contain the same pixel size. To do this, linear interpolation has been used. Afterward, patterns were analyzed for different sorts of plastics. As a result, we've managed to confirm Lauren Biermann's research results, showing that we can distinguish different objects. A good example of this can be seen at the left-hand side of the slide, where reflectance spectrums of seaweeds of different concentrations are depicted. This image has been derived during the report, and it shows a reproducible reflectance pattern, which can be used for seaweed detection. In regard to plastics, despite plastic pollutions are common nowadays, due to numerous reasons, it was problematic to locate their exact positioned in the water. This is the reason why terrestrial targets were analyzed. And in this report, we confirm polycarbonate detection as it is used for greenhouses, which were used as plastic targets. You may see this reflected at the top of the slide, where polycarbonate reflection on the soil background is demonstrated. At this plot, a very well visible and reproducible polycarbonate spectrum is seen, which make it possible to reliably distinguish it from any other objects. The other big problem is that mixed litter patterns We analyzed trash dumps to simulate real plastic patches in oceans, but we received a lot of mixed information during this. This is the other concern we should take into account in the future. In general, the research is ongoing, and the results look promising to keep working on this. Now I'd like to pass the microphone to Harshita, who will tell you about challenges of the Arctic Ocean.
Thank you, Stanislav. Now, it is important to consider a few challenges posed by the Arctic's natural environment before proposing any technical space-based solutions. And we mainly identified sea ice, satellite signals, and clouds. The thickness of Arctic sea ice varies tremendously throughout the year, but on average, ice is 2 to 3 meters thick, with some Arctic regions 4 to 5 meters thick, thus resulting in reduced satellite signals and Earth observation. Here on the right, as you can see, is an example of microplastics found in the sea ice, which illustrate the plastic problem under intense sea ice conditions. And this can be a tedious job to locate and extract manually. We propose a combination of in situ technologies and space-based methods to track these plastics stuck deep within the sea ice. A first method, underwater robots can be coupled with passive microwave technology for this detection. Since objects at the Earth's surface emit both infrared radiation and microwaves at low energy levels, and clouds are known to emit lower microwave radiation compared to sea ice, this makes it easier for microwaves to penetrate clouds and detect plastic within sea ice during the day and night, regardless of cloud cover. And now a second approach could be a combination of a mathematical model called Fourier transform imaging spectrometer and an automated polymer identification approach that can yield high resolution chemical images followed by sea ice scoring. And a third approach could use satellite altimetry with various machine learning algorithms such as decision trees and random forests to estimate plastic debris in Arctic sea ice. And now in the next slide, we shall discuss the automated detection methods for various types of clouds. Satellite signals can vary heavily based on the Arctic atmosphere. And these three levels of scattering, as seen in the diagram here, hinder the most with remote sensing data. We propose two methods here to detect clouds automatically using satellite remote sensing technologies. First is the classical algorithm approach, that are implemented using a threshold of different image parameters. However, these threshold-based methods have poor universality since the values change as per location and time. And second,
Okay, so Arshita's having connection troubles, so maybe.
I'll take over.
Yes, thank you.
So the second method that we found was a machine learning approach, which has an accuracy of up to 98%. And the way that clouds impact the signal of satellites is shown in the picture on the right. So basically, it scatters the signal, making it less strong. And I'll now move to the next slide to present you with some of the new cutting-edge technologies that we discovered. So first of all, we have the autonomous underwater vehicles that Harshita told you about before, also shortened up as AUVs. These are the robots that are underwater, as the name explains, and they are able, with optical recognition, to differentiate between plastic pollution and, for example, seaweed or fish. So basically fauna and flora. The other technology that we find is a key to provide an integrated solution for monitoring and tracking plastic pollution are high altitude balloons. These are shown on the left in the slide. These balloons are designed to stay in one place for a longer time, and they can have a payload of our choice. And we could, for example, use them to have a payload that monitors the water or the ice surface in places where the signal strength of the satellites are not good enough. I'll now pass over to Finn, who will.
Thank you, Sammy. So while keeping in mind the technical limitations that Harshita and Sammy just went over, we propose a year-round integrated strategy to monitor plastic in the Arctic Ocean using space technologies. Our plan is in two parts, depending on the ice conditions or seasons, with the objective to monitor the ocean currents to predict the formation of gyres and use of new technologies associated with the existing space technologies to monitor the ocean plastic that is present. The year-round space-based infrastructure needed to support this is largely already in place. Satellites in highly inclined or near polar orbits are already providing observations and could aid in coordinating surface fleets and submersible drones, such as Landsat and Sentinel families. In the summer and spring seasons, on the left, when most of the Arctic ice is melted, it is the best time to use remote sensing technology, with satellites and stratospheric balloons using a remote sensing payload shown in the sky. Sufficiently precise remote sensing will allow for the creation of maps that can determine the sources and flow of debris and direct cleaning efforts. The balloons will also be useful to coordinate autonomous drone cleanup missions and navigate AUVs and innovative technologies depicted in the ocean. We have some of AUVs present and small jellyfish-like robots. To monitor ocean currents, the sea surface temperature will be measured using satellite sensors such as Landsat 8 or Sentinel-3. From these measurements, it is possible to predict currents as the different types of ocean circulation are interlinked. Moving to the fall and winter seasons, the ice, as you can see, will be a much larger obstacle for satellite imaging and stratospheric balloons due to the thickness and albedo. As such, the best plan would be to rely on several fleets of underwater robots, AUVs, as well as the jellyfish-like robots, and any other innovative technologies for underwater. Satellite navigation will be the necessity for robots operating independently of a fixed base of operations. So in combination with these techniques, active surface cleaning strategies such as the floating robot for eliminating debris and the ocean cleanup project can capture plastics. We suggest that these are in combination with the technology developments we've discussed. This integrated strategy will need to operate in conjunction with policy and law changes that protect the Arctic and endeavor to reduce plastic waste from continuing to freely flow into the oceans. As increased shipping traffic populates the Arctic, it is also suggested that sensors be placed on vessels to monitor possible debris routes. In the near future, satellites can be expected to have the capabilities required for preventative and remedial plastic pollution mitigation. Next, we wanted to look at the scalability of our integrated strategy. Luckily for us, the other oceans are not challenged by sea ice presence and the dense cloud coverage that the Arctic Ocean experiences. The absence of sea ice improves the communication between AUVs and satellites and reduces the complexity of instruments, thus reducing costs. The illumination under the ocean surface is improved without sea ice for better reflectance reading to differentiate between objects. With milder water temperatures, AUV battery life can also last longer per deployment, resulting in further cost reductions. I'll now pass the floor back to Julia, who will summarize the space technology section. Thank you.
Okay, so many thanks to Nigun, Stanislav, Finn, Arshita, and Sami that answered to the question, can space technologies help to solve the problem? And the answer is yes, they can, but they work best when coupled with further technologies, which is why we proposed an integrated solution. The main takeaways of this section are the following. 1, plastic is detectable from space through Earth observation satellites. 2, understanding the oceans makes the monitoring and tracking easier. 3, the Arctic region poses challenges which are less or not present in other oceans. 4, an integrated solution combining space technology with in situ methods work best. And 5, the integrated strategy can be also scaled to other oceans. So at this point, may I pass the floor to Laura, who will answer our last question. How can we spread the word?
Thank you again, Julia. So, in order to design outreach tools that may be useful to raise awareness regarding plastic pollution in the ocean, we aim to educate the public. This is via 2 separate but complementary messages for a common purpose, a major reduction in plastic pollution. The first audience is targeted at policymakers, who ultimately decide whether to invest financial and human resources to implement a political and economic strategy that tackles the problem. The second audience is targeted at the general public. This will be to communicate the importance that everyone can make an effort to follow the best practices and contribute to that strategy. Finally, an initiative championed by the International Space University is proposed, involving both alumni and faculty to physically take action against plastic pollution. We wish to propose an international symposium. This will be the use of virtual events with the participation of scientists, industrialists, and experts, bringing their own unique observations and recommendations to mitigate the problem of plastic pollution worldwide. We also want to launch our very own initiative, which is ISU Plastic Cleanup. This will be done via the use of educational tools, social media, and audiovisuals, which can help inform people of all ages and industries. 80% of microplastic is from land-based sources. Therefore, mitigating plastic from entering the oceans is important. In the next slide, I will discuss our scheduled outreach. So far, we intend on spreading awareness of plastic pollution at the International Astronautical Congress. Here, we will present our report and ideas, presenting our executive summary and poster aiming to reach professionals and the public from across the globe. And now pass the floor back to my colleagues, Julia and Sami.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So to conclude, this presentation has covered the necessity of monitoring plastic pollution, specifically in the Arctic Ocean, by highlighting the technological, economical, and political challenges that will be faced. The problem statement which directed our research was, how can we monitor ocean plastic pollution using space technology? The solutions based on space technologies proposed were centered around the Arctic Ocean, with the aim to scale it to the other oceans, as this is a global issue. Ultimately, we have found that no one solution, be it drones, satellites, or other, is sufficient in itself for an effective and consistent monitoring of all plastics. That's why an integration of separate technologies and approaches will be necessary if the problem is to be assessed and eventually resolved. Our findings allow us to conclude that space should play a role in this complex and articulated combination of technologies, since it offers physical and operational advantages that are not only useful but unique, and would therefore play a key role in this solution to this worldwide problem. However, substantial governmental efforts must be made to implement such solutions. And that's why we also proposed some outreach and communication alternatives. We expect that our solutions will encourage researchers to investigate using a combination of technologies associated with space, with the sole aim of solving plastic pollution at a global level. Before to conclude, I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Sami that will brief you with our recommendations.
Thank you, Julia. From our work, we have deduced a number of recommendations, but I'll present only 4 of them today. The remaining recommendations can be found in our report. The first recommendation is based on the Arctic trade routes that were presented by Harshita at the beginning of this presentation. We suggest that one should do an in-depth cost-benefit analysis of the new trade routes that will open up once the ice melts. This analysis will help understand how plastic pollution will be impacted by these new roads and how it impacts the economy, which is based on these roads as well. Our second recommendation is based on the integrated strategies, such as the one Finn presented to you before. We believe that they are essential in order to track and monitor plastic pollution in oceans all over the world, because, as we said, it is not enough to only use space technologies, but without the space technologies, the solution would lag as well. So we believe that there should be more research to have a complete solution which combines the space-based technologies with in situ technologies. On the next slide, I'll continue with the third and the fourth recommendation, which are based on the findings from our experiment that Stanislav presented to you. We recommend to improve synthetic aperture radar to have a better image quality, and also to research floating debris index, which helps identify plastic pollution on the images, as both of them are lacking of precision. So we found out that both of them are lacking in precision during our experiment. Furthermore, we strongly suggest to improve the so-called NDVI, which is a normalized difference vegetation index, which was also very helpful in our experiment to identify and differentiate between floating plastic debris, and floating vegetation such as algae. By improving this index, we will improve the detection of floating plastic pollution, thus making the tracking and monitoring of plastic pollution in the oceans more efficient. But before I finish, I want to thank all the people who helped us during this project. So first of all, I want to thank the ISU faculty and staff for supporting us throughout these months, especially our faculty interfaces, Professor Hill and Professor Goldman, who were on our side all the time. Furthermore, we want to thank some organization representatives for their valuable contribution, such as Professor Suyin Tan, Vera Pinto from ISA, and Sylvain Michel from CNES. That concludes our presentation, and we would like to thank you very much for your time, and we will now welcome any questions you have.
Okay, well, thank you, Sammy, and thank you, Team Oceans and Plastics, for a very good presentation. You know, I'm tempted to say, given the Arctic background, a very cool presentation, but that would be a bit of a dad joke, so I won't say that. Certainly speaking kind of personally, watching your work through the year has, irrespective of the Arctic aspect, has sensitized me personally to plastic and the amount of plastic in my life. And you know, pretty much now, every time I pick up a piece of plastic, I think, what's going to be the impact of this particular piece of plastic? So it's been very valuable, you know, for me in that aspect, and yeah, I hope that it will become more so. I know you have 2 papers to present at the International Astronautical Congress in Dubai in October, which I hope will continue this. But now it's time for the Q&A, and we're doing it the opposite way around in faculty order this time, which means that I'm actually first. So I will ask my question, and then I will you know, pass on to Professor Woutering. On slide 26, Harshita was talking about the health of Nunavik mothers and children, and the fact that this had you know, this had declined. I guess my question there was, and it wasn't completely kind of clear to me from there, was is there actual causational proof, okay, that this decline in mother and child health is due to plastic? I mean, because I can quite conceive there could be many environmental stresses that could be leading to these effects. So is it definitive that this is caused by plastics?
Thank you, Chris, for your, oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chris, for the question. I'll hand it over to Harshita, who is our expert on that field.
Thank you, Sammy, and I apologize. Thank you, Chris, for your question. And to answer, yes, there have been studies, there have been papers that have mentioned that high level of plastic contaminants are the reason for this. There have been many tests that have been conducted on mother-child pairs, as seen here, and it has been shown that it's because of the consumption of the food. As I mentioned, the traditional diet does contain fish and a lot of seals and even reindeer for that matter. And it is because of the secondary ingestion of the animals, and in turn that humans consume this, and therefore there is fluctuation, and it does bother their health in a very unfortunate manner.
Okay, well, I mean, thank you for that answer. I think that's very important, because to a certain extent, for all of us, these things can seem very distant. You know, they don't involve us directly, but when we hear that, you know, they're affecting the health of mothers and children, I think that's particularly impactful. So that's my question. I'll now hand over to Professor Wotring.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, team, for your excellent presentation. I have a question about the advantages of using space technology to address these issues on Earth. It seems like you have made a very good general case for this, but I would like you to elaborate just a little bit on whether using space technologies that you're talking about, would it make plastic pollution cleanup cheaper or faster or better in some way?
Thank you, Professor Wotring, for that question. I'm going to answer it. So when we talked with organizations who do cleanup, they said, of course, that they mainly clean up at the beaches, but that there is also a lot of garbage, plastic garbage in the middle of the sea. But in order to find it, they need a lot of time and resources in order to travel and look up where exactly those patches are. And using a space technology like the one we studied in our experiment will help cleanups to be more efficient, as we can target specific areas with a high density of plastic pollution.
Thank you very much. I will pass the floor to my colleague, Professor Tejumola.
Thank you very much, Virginia. I want to say congratulations to the team also. I think you have done a great job. I just have a simple question, and it's really not a very technical one. I'd like to know, for example, I'm an investor and I want to start a company, and my focus is monitoring plastic from space. Can you advise what I should do in the short term, medium term, and long term? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Tejumola. So I think that Stanislav in this case is the best to answer this question.
Okay, so just to just to clarify, could you please repeat the question?
So, I'm an investor. I want to start a company, and my focus is to use space to monitor plastic. And I want to get profit from this. So can you advise what I should do in short term, medium term, and long term?
Okay. Okay. I think that our company, if we would create a company from this, we could. We would not propose. Obviously, we would not propose an instant solution, but this would be an interested. This would be an interesting direction of development for governments in long-term perspective. From the other side, we could sell our data analysis and our data products. We know that there is already market for this. So this is the second aspect. This is short-term profit for you as for the investor. Apart from that, we could also sell our services to other companies, not data products, but our researches and our our databases and neural networks that we use, because in this research we are planning to use machine learning, and these algorithms require a significant time for learning, and we could propose our services in this direction. Also, we could advise you as for the investor to invest in high altitude balloons, which could be used as additional part of our integrated solution. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Not quite, but thank you for the answers. I will pass the floor to Professor Sun.
Okay, thank you, Taiwo. And first of all, I want to say this is really a good progress, and during your for your teamwork, and I starting from the early phase and to now, and there's really a lot of improvement and progress. Is an excellent presentation today. And for my question is links also with my disciplinary, and I just make assumptions that you receive some money from the government, and saying we tried to monitoring the gyro, and which is informing and in the Arctic Ocean, and if you could propose a satellite for this kind of monitoring, which kind of orbit are you going to propose, and which kind of payloads are you going to use and for your satellite? Hello?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sun, for the question. So you want to know which orbit is the best to monitor plastic pollution from using a satellite, right?
Yeah, to study the because it's still in the early phase, and to forming the gyro. So this is for this kind of purpose. Orbit and also the payloads, and because you mentioned quite a lot of space technology could be used, and I think now you get a chance and to make a dedicated satellite for this purpose, and which kind of payloads you also could propose.
Okay, I'm going to answer the question. So in regards to the orbit, except for the Arctic Ocean, we recommend you can use a geostationary orbit, but also an other orbit, as long as as the satellite is covering the area that you actually want to see. Why I say not the Arctic Ocean? Because of its altitude. For example, if you use an integrated solution as the one that we suggested, you will have problems with the GPS signal. So in the particular case of the Arctic Ocean, the satellite monitoring will not be enough, which is why we, as I said, we suggested integrated solution. And I'm sorry, I think I forgot the rest of the question.
Yeah. Second question is about the payloads, and which kind of payloads you could propose, and your team could propose, and for the satellite.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to the payload, what definitely is useful is the synthetic aperture radar that Stanislav mentioned, and actually a similar payload than Sentinel-2B, as our experiment proves that the research that Lauren Bierman did is replicable, and with the recommendation based on the improvement of the FDI, so the floating debris index, and of the NDVI, sorry, you will be able to track plastic pollution. Another recommendation we put in our report was that we suspect that the water temperature also plays a role in the movement of the plastic debris. So we would suggest to also add a payload which is capable of monitoring the water temperature as well. And if you aim to track macroplastic, our research and interviews with specialists recommended to also use a payload which is able to track or monitor the altitude, because if you have a huge patch of macroplastic, the altitude of the water, not of the water, it's the same, but the altitude measured with the satellite will be slightly higher than in the rest, in the surrounding area. So an altimeter would also be very useful as a payload.
Okay, thank you. Now I pass the floor to Daniela.
Okay, thank you, Professor Sun. Congratulations to team for an excellent work and also very well done presentation. So I have a question related to your experiment, which you present on slide number 36. And it's based on Lauren Bierman's research and utilization of Sentinel-2 data. I will wait when you will find. Okay, I have a question. So which software was used to modulate and to get these graphics?
Thank you for the question, Professor Stupa. I'll hand over to Stanislav, who will give you more information.
Thank you for the question. Actually, we have used our own software, which we wrote in C in order to process bitmap files received, raw bitmap files received from Sentinel-2. And yeah, so essentially there were several parts, several different utilities, and the one that has been used exactly for building these plots as bitmap analyzing utility, which received a set of images as an input information, and the pixel coordinates, coordinates of pixels that constituted some interest for us. For example, we have used this algorithm with terrestrial targets. In this case, in the case of this plot, which you may see at the top of the slide, greenhouses were used. So we estimated we estimated several coordinates, pixel coordinates, which we would like to analyze, and we analyzed the area of the greenhouse and the nearby area to compare it with the soil. And this is an example of how these plots were built. Of course, there were other software, for example, resampling software, because as you may know, there are 11 bands in on 11 bands on Sentinel-2, and they all have different, some of them have different special resolution, and it was crucial to perform resampling to have the same pixel size, the same pixel metrics, which were analyzed by other utilities. So essentially there were several utilities, but all of them were written by ourselves.
Okay, well done. And so congratulations for this and for your coming conference. So put this actually your outputs and your results in the first row, because this is your unique and special work. So I think this has to be presented a little bit more for the conference. So bravo once again. So I will pass the floor to Professor Peters. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Daniela, and my congratulations to the team. I always like to point something very specific. What I really liked about your presentation is that you worked very graphical, so with a lot of pictures and not so much text. That was quite an asset, I must say. Now, in your presentation, you talked about this integrated strategy with AUVs. Very interesting, but that must cost quite a lot. So what I have not heard is who's going to pay the ferryman? Who's going to pay for it? Your recommendation one, if I well understood, maybe I didn't understand, but your recommendation one was a little bit hinting that you were going to look at these people who benefited it, so who benefited from the transpolar sea route. Do you have in mind to charge the shipping companies who benefit from that integrated strategy? Is that your target to get your income?
Thank you, Professor Peters, for the question. I'll hand it over to Finn, who will give you more information about it.
Thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Professor Peters. For the first part, we did look at a cost estimation. It was a bit difficult to figure out the exact cost because it does depend on which instruments we use for the payload. But for example, one of the 0 to infinity balloons for a person to go up costs about 132,000. That's the estimate that they have available. But in terms of instrumentation, it could be anywhere from 5,000 to 100,000, depending on what we choose to send up. There are ways to look at sort of repurposed AUVs and reduce the costs. And so that estimate is about 10,000 for a repurposed AUV. And there are also some other models that can be in partnership with universities that are already sending a lot of AUVs for marine research. For the second part, the recommendation for the cost estimation on trade routes was because we were trying to see if there was sort of a correlation between the increased trade route and plastic pollution, because much of the pollution we identified is from fishing nets, from ghost gear, as well as containers that either fall into the ocean and collisions that chip off different debris. And so in that case, the thought is that through the Arctic framework that we discussed, there could be sort of either the creation of a fund that each of these countries pay into if it does prove that the extensive use of this transpolar route does result in far more plastic pollution. So you could either charge it that way. And then I've also seen it sort of gets into geopolitical considerations because of Russia, China, and the US, but there was one consideration towards charging the, instead of the country, but the actual shipping companies, not the country, but the actual shipping companies that do the majority of this transport. And so Costco, for example, for China, is one major shipping company that they're looking at for their contributions to plastic pollution. So I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that answers very well the question. I think you have a good indication on the path that should be covered by the recommendation. I think you're on the right path there. Thank you very much for that. And let me now transfer to my colleague, Professor Hill.
Thank you very much, Professor Peters, and heartiest congratulations to TP, Space and Oceans. Many thanks for this very informative presentation. My one question is very straightforward. In fact, it's what new information, if any, have you included in this presentation since you submitted your final TP report?
Thank you, Professor Hill. So you're asking about the newest information. I'll answer this question. So first of all, we looked at the headlines. If Julia, could you show the headlines again, please? there's some of the headlines who are from this year and which we didn't find when we were looking for the literature for our project. So, for example, the first headline below the title, what's next for sustainable, thank you. What's next for sustainable development is, for example, a very recent headline which came out only this year in April. So after we finished our report, and I think we are also more aware of the news around plastic pollution. We also, for example, realize that there is a Mother Ocean Day and an Ocean Day, for example. Julia has written a post for it. And also the experiment was still ongoing after we handed in the report. So we provided to you in this presentation our newest results that we got.
Thank you so much, Sami, for this. May I pass it forward to my colleague, Professor Goldman?
Yeah, thank you very much, Team Ocean, for your presentation. Of course, we had many interactions, and we had lots of opportunities, Professor here and myself, to provide you with suggestions, and thanks for taking into account most of them. I guess there's still one point I didn't really insist upon over the past months, or not very clearly. And so you have this discussion about spreading the word, and now pushing you a bit further. I mean, it's really not a space-related question for sure, and it's a difficult question. But given the main sources of pollution, of plastic pollution in the Arctic, and that's difficult to assess, given the chances to decrease those sources, and some for sure are easier to decrease than others, or let's say some are more difficult to decrease than others. What would be your preferred target audience? You know, if you had one set of people you could really approach, who would you like to talk to? Is this populations? Is this bankers? Is this fisher companies, fish companies, or any others? Who do you think is a community, so to speak, that presents the best chances to improve the situation in the short run?
Thank you, Professor Goldman. I'll hand over to Julia, which I think is the most perfect person to answer your question.
Yes, sure. So we believe that every change begins from the bottom. So I think that if we should target only one particular sector, that will be the general public, because the general public has the power to move also governments. So I don't know if I would choose a particular sector like fishermen, for example, but I would say not government as a first place, because it's more difficult to get to governments if there is not, let's say, a very big movement from the bottom. So, like, for example, in the Arctic Ocean, I think that they are in a very good path, because they had a symposium about plastic pollution in the Arctic Ocean last March. But it was a top-level forum. So yes, I think that it will be better to target, first of all, the general public. And how to do that? I think that progress is telling us that we need to use social media, because younger generations are also the ones that need to be, let's say, that need some information about this, and they can do something also for example, for their parents, grandparents. So I think that, yes, ultimately, if I had to choose, I would choose younger generation, so the general public, and as medium, social media, and yes, audiovisuals to spread the word.
Okay, so just to clarify, when you say address the general public, this is for the public to then put pressure on decision makers, not for the public to stop, I mean, to pay more attention to the garbage.
No, exactly. I mean, both, because general public need to be, let's say, formed about this need to be informed about this information, this topic, so that they can behave better, so that, like, for example, buying some biodegradable objects and not plastic object. I know that it's difficult, but also, for example, the European Union is doing some steps forward that. So with the directive they issued sometimes, like, so 2 years ago. So I think, yes, the general public should both behave in a better way, so to try to stop this plastic pollution from the source of the problem, and then also to influence the government to take better decisions.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia, and thank you very much to the whole team for a very nice presentation. I pass the floor to Juan.
Hello, Juan de Dalmau here. I know we are now beyond the allocated time for this session, so I will ask no question, only a couple of remarks. I am very much like Professor Welch in that I have learned myself since you started with this project last November in terms of awareness and information. So I think you have already reached part of your goal of informing the public. And I want to congratulate both teams that have presented today, including the second team that has really made a very professional presentation. We could see clearly that you have rehearsed, that you have worked on the details of the graphics, of how you introduced yourselves when you started speaking. You were even prepared to jump in immediately when someone had a connection difficulty. So I would like to encourage you to continue on this path and to continue communicating. Those of you who have visited the ISU website today have seen already a story on space and ocean plastics. So please continue. And I encourage the Space Medical Center team to do the same, to communicate and let the world know about what you're doing. And hopefully see you in Dubai for your presentations, if not before. Now back to Professor Welch.
Okay, well, thank you to my colleagues for the questions there, and thank you for Team Space and Oceans for answering those questions, which was done very well indeed. This brings us to the end of the MSS21 team project presentation. So I would like to wrap up by thanking all the presenters, all the team members who we haven't seen on the screens today, but who made significant contributions, obviously, to the projects, over the academic year. Thanks in particular to the designated faculty who were the interfaces for these projects, for Space Medical Center, Professor Wotring and Professor Tejimola, and for Space and Oceans, Professor Goldman and Professor Hill. We're very grateful to them for assisting you all. Congratulations on finally completing your team projects. I hope that's a very nice feeling to know that there is really nothing left for you to do on the team projects, and you can have a little bit of time off, only a little bit because the individual project presentations are on Monday and Tuesday. But then that will be the end of the academic component of the program. Still the internships to do, obviously. So congratulations to everybody involved. Thank you also to my ISU colleagues in IT IT for making the Zoom and the webinars and the YouTube happen. Thanks to Tasmir, our TA, for managing things behind the scenes there in terms of turning microphones on and off, and connecting and disconnecting people as appropriate. Thanks to Marjana, I don't think she's online, but for doing some of the planning and logistical support in the background there. It feels a little bit like a Friday, really, but it's only a Wednesday. But at least here in France, for those of you who are here, it's a public holiday tomorrow, so we can sort of pretend it's a Friday for those of us in France, because we know that we have tomorrow off. So without any more ado, thank you again to all concerned. A very nice conclusion to these two team projects. And that's the end. So thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice